Chapter 151. Ding Yong was a treasure hunter. He had made a name for himself by fighting. When he was in an ancient tomb, he accidentally swallowed an elixir that was still in its shelf life. Because of this, he who was originally just a mortal had one foot in the door of immortality. After accumulating a lot of wealth, he changed his identity and became the boss of a shell company with a net worth of tens of millions. At the same time, because he had been brainwashed by all the immortal cultivation novels on the internet, Ding Yong realized that he had stepped into a realm that ordinary people had never even heard of in their lives through a fortuitous encounter. He realized something: I'm definitely the F***king main character. Unfortunately, in this era there was a lack of spiritual chi. It was almost impossible to reach the threshold of immortality through self-exploration. Therefore, Ding Yong simply transformed his shell company into a garbage dump. He went to the countryside to collect all kinds of ancient garbage. He often went to the antique street and became a fat sheep in the eyes of all the antique shop owners. He wanted to find a few magic treasures that had been passed down from ancient times. He didn't expect that he would really find some strange magic treasures. Although he didn't find anything good, such as the ring with the old grandpa in it, or the mysterious bottle that could accelerate the ripening of all kinds of strange flowers and herbs, he was even more convinced that I am the main character. Today he had come out on a whim to wander around, but he didn't expect to see something that interested him. Now he was following a teenager who was dressed like a country bumpkin. Don't get me wrong. He did not have the kind of hobby that would make men's chrysanthemums cold. He was just curious. Within a day, the young man had visited almost all the lottery shops in the vicinity. As long as the shop sold scratch-off tickets, he would take out money to buy one. After scratching off the scratch-off tickets, he would leave. That's right. Every ticket had a prize, and the prize was around 1,000 to 5,000. After half a day he had almost earned 100,000 yuan. Although it was not comparable to Ding Yang's, it made Ding Yong realize that the teenager probably had some kind of treasure. Of course, Ding Yong did not want to kill him and rob him. Even if he had been brainwashed by immortal cultivation novels, he was very clear that this was a society governed by law. It had not yet reached the point where he could kill anyone who stood in his way. If he casually killed someone, he would have to go to prison to pick up soap or eat peanuts. Besides, Ding Yong himself was not a bad guy. Of course, he was not a good guy either. Otherwise, he would not have needed to transform his company into a garbage dump at all. He could have used more radical methods to collect what he suspected to be magical equipment. Right now, he just wanted to see the other party's treasure. He saw the young man once again exchange a colored dot for a 5,000 yuan bonus and put it into the bag he just bought not long ago. After carefully leaving the place, he was about to follow him, but he found that 3 burly men were one step ahead of him and did the same thing. Dividing line: how is it? This emperor is still quite useful, right? The female ghost in the sword proudly floated around Chen Tua. After searching for half a day, she realized that among the few abilities she had left, she still had X-ray vision. Therefore he took Chen Tua to buy scratch-off tickets. Although the young man was a little hesitant about this in the end when he thought about his father who was still lying in bed and his brother who was waiting for school fees, he could only use this shady method to make money. In theory, after he had enough capital, he could use the female ghost's ability to make a lot of money by gambling on stones, picking up scraps and so on. However, if he did that, this novel would become a business novel, so Tua did not plan to do that. It's okay. Because he always felt that if he praised the female ghost would get carried away. So Chen Tua just replied without any expression. About the matter of the blood recognizing its master. No, I've been anemic recently. It's fine if you don't use your blood. This emperor is not picky. No, I've been dizzy with blood recently. You clearly had duck blood and vermicelli soup for lunch. Is that the same thing? The two bickered as they walked into a small alley. At this time, the female ghost in the sword glanced behind Chen Tua and said leisurely, "There are a few guys with bad intentions sneaking up on you." Chen Tua was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted. As the saying goes, don't show your wealth. It should be because when he won the money, he was targeted by the hooligans. After all, a child with a few bundles of money in his hand was quite tempting to the outlaws. Originally, in order to hide the large amount of prize money and the ancient sword, he specially spent money to buy a big backpack, but he did not expect to be targeted. Do you need my help? As long as you drip your blood to recognize me as your master, no matter how many mortals there are, they won't be a match for this emperor. Seeing Chen Tua in a difficult situation, the female ghost in the sword not only did not panic, but also kindly persuaded Chintua. "Look at my shoes," Chintua said unhurriedly. "What?" The female ghost in the sword was stunned. She followed Chintua's gaze and looked down, only to find that he was only wearing a pair of old sports shoes. "I used to wear cloth shoes to participate in the city's middle school's long-distance running competition and won first place. This pair of shoes was my reward at that time." It inserted itself into the lid of the milk tea and it felt quite magical. However, the force of the straw was a little too strong, and the milk tea in the soft plastic cup splashed everywhere. However, Ding Yong seemed to be very satisfied with his skill and he looked at Chintua with a smile. "Little brother, where did you learn from?" If it weren't for the female ghost who criticized Ding Yang's skill, Chintua would probably be frightened by his skill as well. "I'm just an ordinary person." Chintua scratched his head and continued to smile honestly, looking very sincere. "I'm not as good as you, brother Ding. Ordinary people can't buy lottery tickets and win them one by one." Ding Yong laughed and exposed Earthchild's lie without hesitation. This made Chintua's heart tighten, and he instinctively hugged his backpack, thinking that the other party was also here for the money. This was the difference between a person's vision and a person's. Although Chintua wasn't stupid, before he met the female ghost he was just an ordinary farmer's child. Let alone 100,000 yuan, even 1,000 yuan was a huge sum for him. Therefore he couldn't understand the mentality of someone like Ding Yong who didn't lack money, and subconsciously thought that the other party was here for the huge sum of 100,000 yuan. "Ah, don't misunderstand, I'm not interested in your money." Seeing Chintua's reaction, Ding Yong couldn't help but be amused. However, his words had the opposite effect, and Chintua was so scared that he desperately shrank back, trying to put some distance between him and Ding Yong. "F***CK, I'm not interested in your money either." Ding Yong was embarrassed and he coughed dryly. After his expression returned to normal, he slowly said, "Little brother, you must have some kind of magic treasure on you, right? Can you let me have a look?" Magic treasure? The only thing that Earth Kid could think of was the ancient sword that the female ghost had taken over. Just as he was hesitating whether to take it out or not, the female ghost who had been criticizing Ding Yong from his hairstyle to his socks, suddenly turned pale, although her face was originally white, and she suddenly hid under the table. "What's wrong?" Chintua, who had never seen the female ghost like this, couldn't help but be curious. At this moment, there were new customers walking into the milk tea shop, and Chintua and Ding Yang's attention were attracted to them. The newcomers were a strange trio, two young men of similar age and a short lowly. Although the little girl was wearing a cap from her exposed sideburns, her hair was a rare blonde. Then Chintua noticed that one of the young men was carrying a long canvas bag on his back, but he didn't know what was inside. What he was more concerned about was that after the three of them ordered drinks and found a place to sit down, there was an extra person. The extra person was similar to the female ghost, and the color of his whole body was also light like a pearl. His whole body was translucent and he looked very strange. The other party didn't seem to have any intention of avoiding him, and if he listened carefully, Earth Kid could clearly hear their conversation. "I say, that guy was bragging about how powerful the Emperor's sword was, but nothing happened these days." One of the young men complained to the young man with the backpack, "I still have to go back to Jiangjin University to study. If I don't have enough credits, you have to pay for my tuition. Because the Yuanrong sword hasn't recovered yet, we can only determine a rough location, but it should be in this city." The other young man could only smile apologetically. "How are we going to find it in such a big city?" The young man with the hedgehog hair was still very dissatisfied, and he leaned on the table and muttered, "It's not like we're acting in a movie, how can we find it so easily?" The cute blonde girl was eating the tea that she had ordered at some point, and she didn't seem to be interested in the argument of the two people in front of her. "Emperor's sword?" Earth Kid blinked his eyes. It seemed that the female ghost sword was called that. Chapter 153. Of course, Chintua would not sell the ancient sword to those people. First of all, doing that would not only not solve the problem, but it would also give people a feeling that he had ulterior motives, which would make it easier for him to get into trouble and get involved in troublesome situations. Second of all, the female ghost could be considered to have helped him solve an urgent problem. Out of the simple and honest outlook of the Earth Child, he would feel guilty if he sold her off just like that. Moreover, judging from the way the female ghost was so afraid of the people at the table, even if they got the Emperor's sword, they would not treat her well. It was more likely that they would just release the female ghost. Just as he was thinking about this, the people on the other side had finished their milk tea and left the milk tea shop. However, Chintua did not know if it was an illusion, but when they were leaving he felt that the blonde girl seemed to have sensed something and looked in their direction. This gave him a fright. Fortunately, she did not say anything and just left with the two young men. Parting line, Ding Yong lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Through the curling smoke he looked at Chintua, who seemed to be in a daze. Ding Yong had started from scratch and made such a big name at such a young age. Of course he did not rely on luck. He had some experience in judging people. From the very beginning he knew that the little guy in front of him had a certain degree of wariness towards him. Even after he was honest with him, the other party did not let down his guard. The biggest evidence was that this little guy was still pretending to be honest and naive. And now he was in a daze. Actually, he was thinking about the Emperor's sword. It seemed that he was determined not to talk to him anymore. Since the possibility of seeing the treasure or even buying it through legal negotiations was very low, he could only choose other ways to cooperate. As for why he did not use more extreme methods such as threatening or directly using force to get the treasure from Chintua, with his current connections and power, although there would be some repercussions, they were all within the scope of his ability to solve. The reason was very simple. Because in cultivation novels only the villains would do such things. Ding Yong, who thought that he was the main character, would never do such a tasteless thing. Besides, what if he was threatened and said, "Don't bully a poor young man? Kill him to silence him? Alright, since you don't want me to see your treasure, that's fine too." He spread out his hands, indicating that although he was very regretful, he didn't think too much about it. But based on your previous actions, that treasure should have the ability to see through things, right? Chintua glanced at the female ghost who had regained her arrogance after those people left. Chapter 154. With so many things happening, Chintua didn't have the leisure to continue using the lottery to make money. In order to not make his mother worry, he didn't stay any longer and directly got on the bus back home, planning to return home before it got dark. Unlike the bus to southern Chu, the bus back home was completely empty. Chintua subconsciously sat in the last row and hugged the backpack. He didn't care about the female ghost who was making faces at him. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while he asked the female ghost who was looking out of the window out of boredom. "Speaking of which, I still don't know your name." The female ghost opened her eyes wide and had an expression of, "This guy actually took the initiative to talk to me. What's wrong with this world?" It seemed like Chintua's previous actions had left a psychological shadow in this guy's heart. "It's fine if you don't want to say it." However, Chintua interpreted the female ghost's silence as another meaning, so he continued to bury his face behind the backpack and stare blankly. "No, wait. This Emperor's brain just hasn't processed it yet. How about you ask again?" Chintua's gaze coldly watched the insatiable female ghost. "Son of Heaven, just call me Son of Heaven." Thus, the female ghost immediately gave in. "You call yourself this Emperor and your name is Son of Heaven? You're really stubborn about this setting." "It's not a setting. It's always been like this." The female ghost wanted to cry but had no tears. "This Emperor is the sword spirit of the Son of Heaven's sword. That's why I'm called Son of Heaven." As for this Emperor's name, it was very normal in that era. This Emperor even knew a guy who always said something like, "This Emperor is the Imperial Examination." Chintua hesitated for a moment, but in the end he decided not to care about this guy's relationship with Chu Yuan. "But why did you suddenly ask for this Emperor's name?" Could it be that you saw this Emperor's great power, so you became enlightened and want to drip blood to recognize me as your master? Because you're embarrassed, you're trying to worm your way into being friends with me? Ooh, what a cute guy. Wait, this Emperor was wrong. Please don't throw the Son of Heaven sword out the window." The originally arrogant Son of Heaven immediately became terrified. To be honest, Chintua was having a hard time dealing with this fellow who did not learn his lesson. If it were someone with ambition such as Ding Yong, if they obtained the Emperor's sword, they would definitely make good use of this power to fight for greater benefits for themselves. If it was someone who was afraid of trouble, throwing away the sword early was also a choice. In terms of personality, Chintua was closer to the latter. However, his principles made it impossible for him to burn the bridge after crossing the river and abandon her after using the power of the Emperor to earn money. Seriously, what would happen if you could absorb human blood? Chin Tua tried his best to make himself look more serious. Otherwise, as a sword spirit, Tianzi would most likely fool around with this question. When the time comes, even if you raise the Son of Heaven's sword and shout, "I'm invincible in the world," no boots will fall from the sky and stab you to death. Tianzi crossed his arms and answered with uncertainty. What's the point of sucking blood if you don't even know the use of it? Chin Tua felt that he was an idiot for being so serious just now. What can I do? I only remember that I seemed to have been trapped by something at the beginning. In order to escape, I used all my strength. In the end, I even lost my memories of the past. I only remember some unimportant things. It turned out that Chu Yuan belonged to the type of people who didn't matter. And don't look at me like this now. When I was at my peak, I was a mature beauty with a nice body. How should he put it? Looking at a little girl full of ancient martial arts style speaking English, it always made him feel like he was acting out of a play. What's the meaning of that suspicious look? I'm not lying to you. I used to be called Beauty You. Wait a minute, let me straighten it out first. Chin Tua dug his ears. After confirming that he did not hear wrongly, his face was full of shock. He felt that he had learned history for nothing. You're Beauty You? Didn't I say before that I talked and laughed with that kid Xiang Yu before? The female ghost who called herself Tianzi answered matter-of-factly. Talking and laughing with Overlord Yuji were completely different, right? Wait a minute, since she still remembered this matter, could it be that Xiang Yu, the Overlord of Chu, also belonged to the unimportant category in this girl's memory? Not good. Now when I read the story of Overlord Yuji in the future, my tears will come from another side. Then when you were in the milk tea shop, why did you hide when you saw those foreigners? Then Earthchild asked again. Because I noticed that they had the kind of aura that once trapped me. It was very, very annoying. At this point, the expression on Tianzi's face changed rapidly several times like a changing color neon light. Finally, she sighed, but I don't know why, but it was a nostalgic aura. Earthchild realized that this did not seem to be a pleasant experience for Tianzi to talk about. So he immediately asked another question. Since you don't even know what will happen after sucking blood, why do you crave blood so much? The ancient people didn't know that rice would eventually turn into glucose to replenish energy. Didn't they still want to eat? Tianzi replied without hesitation. Chin Tua, who dropped out of school and didn't study biology, was speechless. So where did this guy who said he was a living fossil learn this kind of knowledge from? But it's incredible that you would talk so much to me. Seeing that Earthchild didn't seem to have anything else to ask, Tianzi said with a smile. Obviously this was very fresh to him. Chin Tua looked at the sky outside and found that it was almost dusk. But the scenery outside the window gradually became familiar. It seemed that they would soon arrive at Chin Tua's hometown. Tianzi, I've decided to accept that guy's invitation. Just as the bus was about to arrive at the station, Chin Tua suddenly said. Oh. The sword spirit of Tianzi's sword looked incredulous. I'll have to trouble you then. Earthchild's voice sounded almost at the same time as the bus arrived at the station. When all this is done, I'll give you a drop of blood. Is it the blood of livestock such as chickens, ducks, pigs and dogs, and then you'll laugh and say hee hee, I didn't say human blood? What kind of image do you have of me in your mind? Chin Tua sighed. You don't play by the rules. You're obviously very insidious, but you pretend to be honest and deceive people. Sure enough, forget about the blood dripping. This guy will be my free labor until he dies. For a country bumpkin like him who had spent the first half of his life in the countryside, these things with long names always sounded awesome even though he didn't understand them. That talisman is a lie, it's definitely a lie. I can't feel any power from it at all. Tianzi was still trying to stir up trouble, but Chin Tua couldn't punish her in front of other people. After all, other than him no one else could see Tianzi. All in all, after understanding that Ding Yang had come prepared, Chin Tua discussed some rules of conduct with him. Then he followed him to the car to get some other necessities. Together they climbed over the fence and walked toward the legendary tomb through the tunnel dug out from the construction site. At present, only a prototype of the tunnel had been dug out. Although the supports and other things had been built, there were no stairs. In the darkness it was very uncomfortable to walk. There were originally lights here and the power was connected from the outside. However, after a series of accidents, even the lights inside the tunnel were broken. Until now no one knew how the light bulbs broke. The construction workers have been scared out of their wits by the continuous accidents. Although they can transfer people from other construction sites to work here, as long as the accidents don't stop, the construction here won't make much progress. Ding Yong, who was walking in front, didn't forget to explain. A little further ahead is where the tomb is. After the workers brought me here last time, they refused to go any further. It's said that the workers who crossed this area were all injured to a certain extent. Now they are all lying in the hospital. The construction company has to pay no less than 500,000 yuan for the medical expenses alone. As they spoke, they saw the so-called tomb not far in front of them. From Tu Wazi's point of view, rather than a tomb, it was more like a courtyard wall and gate of a rich family that was commonly seen in wuxia dramas. The only difference was that the stone lion placed at the entrance of the tomb was not a guardian stone lion, but a creature that Tu Wazi couldn't recognize. It was probably something from a myth. There's even a big red lantern. What was this family thinking when they were buried? Tu Wazi muttered curiously. But then he realized that Ding Yang's footsteps had unknowingly stopped. With the help of the flashlight, he could see that Ding Yang's square face was now full of fear and distortion. His body was even faintly trembling. What's wrong? No. It wasn't like this the last time I was here. Ding Yang held his head, his eyes full of fear. It was clearly just an ordinary tomb before, and the entrance was just a very ordinary hole that was dug out. As a person who was half a step away from entering the door of the cultivation world, when faced with all this, he didn't notice anything strange at all. This was undoubtedly a big blow to him. Indeed, there's something strange about this place. Even Tianzi was no longer joking at this moment. Instead, he stared at the two vermilion gates seriously and said, "If your cultivation is not enough, it's better not to have anything to do with this kind of thing." When he said this, even Tu Wazi felt a little creeped out. And as the excitement from before passed, he who had calmed down also discovered some strange things. If it was buried underground all year round, why was the vermilion gate as new and shiny as the floor that had just been waxed? The lantern also looked like it had just been mounted, and it didn't have the dry feeling that it had after years of being air-dried. In short, he swallowed and tried to calm himself down. Let's go out and think about it first. Ding Yang naturally wouldn't object. Just as they were about to leave, the big red lantern in front of the door suddenly lit up. Then, accompanied by a long and ear-piercing creak, the two vermilion red doors that were more than 3 meters tall inexplicably opened by themselves. However, there was nothing behind the door at all. Even if a strong flashlight shone inside, there was only thick darkness. The ominous premonition became even stronger, which made Tu Wazi turn around and run without any hesitation. But it was all too late. The darkness that flowed out from the door soaked the entire space. Even if he turned around, he couldn't find the original path. No matter how he ran, it was like running in the same place. The distance between him and the strange gate was not even a little bit. All of this was simply, just like a nightmare. Chin Tua sighed deeply and gave up on the futile effort. There was no doubt that there were only two choices now. One was to wait outside the door and see what happened, or to wait for death. Two was to enter the door and find a way to escape, or to seek death. Clenching the straps of his backpack, he took a deep breath and decided to seek death. "Wait, I'll go with you." Ding Yang finally pulled himself together at this time. He hurriedly stood up and followed behind Chin Tua, entering the strange gate with him. Chapter 156. After passing through the door, a small antique house that looked like a courtyard house appeared in the originally empty darkness. In the center of the courtyard, there were several stone lampposts as thick as bowls, emitting a faint orange light. Curious, Chin Tua carefully looked through the hole at the top of the lamppost, which looked like a small pavilion. He found that there was not lamp oil inside but craftsmanship candles. The candles were made to look like half man, half fish. They raised their hands, their faces full of pain, and flames came out of their palms. There was clearly no wind in this underground courtyard, but the candlelight kept swaying, just like a soul that was struggling on its deathbed. "I know, this is the haunted house," Ding Yang suddenly exclaimed. "Haunted what?" Tu Wazi was confused. "Haunted house. I've only heard of it before. It's said that some rich people or feng shui masters, in order to ensure the prosperity of their family, will spend a lot of money and resources to build a haunted house with feng shui before they die. However, once that kind of thing is built on a dead land, not only will it end their family line, but the haunted house itself will also gather a large amount of resentment, forming a feng shui killing trap. It's called the haunted house. Tiske, I didn't expect this rumor to be true. Ding Yang explained with an unsightly expression. Spending so much money to end their family line. Is this person crazy? Tu Wazi couldn't help but mutter. But in this terrifyingly silent environment, muttering was no different from ordinary talking. You can't say that. After all, feng shui is a mystery built on the terrain. If the terrain changes, the feng shui will naturally change as well. Ding Yang shook his head and continued to explain to Tu Wazi. As far as I know, it's recorded in the local annals that during the Southern Chu dynasty, a lake was filled to create farmland here, which greatly changed the feng shui of the city. The style of this house is closer to that of the Ming dynasty, obviously before the lake was filled to create farmland. Maybe it was because of this that the original feng shui treasured land became a haunted house. Then is there any way to break this? Tu Wazi hurriedly asked. The main body of the haunted house isn't that big. If I had known earlier, I would have used a strong explosive to blow it up before the ghost qi leaked out. Ding Yang said with a bitter smile. Although it will be troublesome for the ghost qi to spread to the surface after that, it will disappear sooner or later as the sun shines. It's much better than the current situation. Explosives. Yes, this was very scientific. What about now? While you still have time to catch your breath, let's remember the good times of life. Just as Tu Wazi was considering whether or not he should choose a room to try his luck, the originally dark room suddenly began to flash with a terrifying light. What was even more frightening was that in the flashes of light, one could occasionally see the reflection of a slender figure on the ground. However, the room still felt empty and there was no shadow at all on the paper window. Gradually, every room began to emit the sound of wooden boards colliding with each other, and it became more and more urgent. This place is very bad. If you don't leave quickly, you and that idiot will be eaten alive. Tianzi, who had been a little absent-minded from the beginning, had a solemn expression as she looked around. Qin Tua noticed that she seemed to be different from Ding Yang and himself. Her gaze was not blank and unfocused, but as if she was looking at something. It was very likely that something could also sense Tianzi's existence, so until now, it had not caused any substantial damage to them. However, Qin Tua knew very well that although Tianzi was a supernatural creature, she was also a veritable qi. Even a mortal like him could not do anything to her, let alone a monster in this dangerous place. Therefore, after a few seconds of mental struggle, Qin Tua took out the Emperor's sword from the backpack on his back. Then, under Ding Yang's gaze, he used the blade to cut his palm. Tianzi, can you solve this situation now? Qin Tua, who felt the blood and physical strength in his body rapidly flowing out, asked in a low voice. However, Tianzi just floated in the air with a dull expression on her face. After a while, she looked at her hands in disbelief and muttered softly, I remember now. As soon as she finished speaking, the Emperor's sword in Qin Tua's hand jumped out of his hand and stabbed into the center of the courtyard. Almost at the same time, the restless doors and windows suddenly quieted down. Even the candlelight in the few lampposts that were originally not very stable were no longer jumping. Instead, they were spreading light like real candles. Does this count as solved? Qin Tua asked in disbelief. It felt like Tianzi did not do anything. No, it's not solved. Tianzi sighed. Her tone was completely different from the light and slightly funny feeling from before. It gave people a much calmer feeling. Instead, they're all in hiding. What's wrong? What the hell is going on? Ding Yang, who was still unaware of the situation because he could not see Tianzi, hurriedly asked. Hiding? Qin Tua asked in confusion. Why would they hide? Didn't this idiot just explain? The haunted mansion is an existence that gathers a large amount of resentment. Once this kind of thing faces an existence with a stronger resentment, it will naturally hide out of instinct. Tianzi's expression was somewhat sad. And my main body, the Emperor's sword, happens to be that kind of existence. That's great. If you're here, we can get out, right? Qin Tua did not notice the sad expression on Ding Yang's face because of the sudden good news. Instead, he was eager to try. That's right. Hurry up and leave. Tianzi waved her hand lightly. The thick ink-like darkness outside the door immediately faded away, indicating that the white light of the exit appeared there. Although I don't know what happened, the exit seems to have appeared. Let's run now. Ding Yong was overjoyed. He quickly rushed out of the door and ran towards the exit. Qin Tua subconsciously wanted to pull out the sword, but was stopped by Tianzi. The Emperor's sword is a sword of resentment. After dripping blood to activate the resentment in the sword, it is no longer something that normal people can touch. Otherwise, they might be swallowed up by the resentment that spans thousands of years and become a demon. You don't have to worry about me. Let the Emperor's sword and the haunted mansion be buried underground again. Hurry up and leave. Then I'll have to trouble you. Qin Tua gave Tianzi a thumbs up. Well, even though I said it myself, I will still feel sad that you abandoned me so easily. Tianzi's expression was subtle as she muttered. As expected, you actually don't want to be left alone in this damned place, right? The Earth Child who was about to leave stopped and turned back to look at Son of Heaven. No, The female ghost who had lived for thousands of years was stunned. Then, as if she had accepted her fate, a sad smile appeared on her face. That's right. Because it would definitely be very lonely. The Earth Child grinned and then reached out to Tianzi. Then let's go out together. I don't plan on throwing away such a useful thing like the Emperor's sword. But Tianzi still shook her head. You don't understand at all. Almost all of my sword owners' minds were affected by the resentment in the Emperor's sword and died an unnatural death in the end. Although the Emperor's sword does indeed have unparalleled power, it is also an undeniably ominous sword. I don't want to kill the owner of the Emperor's sword anymore. Sorry, my history isn't very good. I've never heard of such things, the Earth Child said unwaveringly. But I know that a drop of water will be repaid with a gushing spring. My dad was able to gather the medical fees all because of you. Now you became like this because you saved us, so I will never give up on you. You're really an idiot. Tianzi wiped the corners of her eyes, even though she could no longer cry. But at this moment she seemed to have suffered a severe headache. She held her head and screamed. Tianzi. The Earth Child wanted to get close to her, but she blew him far away with a wave of her hand. The resentment is already. Hurry. Run. The ink-like darkness once again swept through the Earth Child's vision. The Tianzi and the Emperor's sword stuck in the stone brick were also swallowed and disappeared in front of him. Before the Earth Child could decide whether to escape or find the Emperor's sword, the black something wrapped around his left foot. It was a black substance that was cold and sticky like mud. It was as if a shadow had come to life, causing the Earth Child to involuntarily have goosebumps all over his body. Then the black mud spread towards the Earth Child's body. At the same time, two bright red spots of light appeared on the ground. This made the Earth Child immediately understand that this damn thing was the monsters in the haunted house. But without the Emperor's sword, he was already helpless against such things. Just as the black mud wrapped around Qin Tua's neck, and Qin Tua had already accepted his fate, something arced through the air and hit the black mud. At the same time, a man's shout came from behind him. Mali Mali, who the Lord of the Heavens is as urgent as the law. With a bang, the lump of black mud retreated back into the shadows. The Earth Child coughed. Only then did he realize that the thing that hit the black mud was a small talisman. He looked behind him and realized that it was Ding Yong who had already run away. Why did you come back? Nonsense. Leaving behind teammates and running away is definitely a side character that won't live past 3 chapters. How could a grand and righteous main character do such a thing? Ding Yong said something that Qin Tua did not understand and helped him up from the ground. Since I brought you in, I have to bring you out in one piece. Uncle, stop talking nonsense, get ready to go. Carrying Qin Tua, Ding Yong desperately ran toward the exit. But before they could reach the exit, their last ray of hope was swallowed up by the darkness once again. However, this wasn't the worst part. What was worse was that they didn't know when it started, but dense red dots of light had already appeared behind them. I'm sorry, Uncle, if it wasn't for me. Qin Tua softly apologized in a depressed voice. Don't argue. Usually when a main character in a xianxia novel is forced to this extent, his skills will improve greatly, and he will become a peerless master. The Rin and Du meridians are from wuxia novels, right? It's more or less the same. Just understand the essence. Although the two seemed to have the time to talk about such meaningless things, the Earth Child knew that Ding Yong was completely out of ideas. His trembling hands and head full of cold sweat revealed this. If he had known, he would have brought Tianzi out more decisively, Just as the densely packed red dots were about to close in on the two of them, there was a loud rumble. Not far away, the white light that signified the exit appeared again, but this time 4 people emerged from it. To be precise, there were 3 people and a ghost. Oh, this mission is finally over. Chapter 157. Let us temporarily rewind the scene to the morning. In a certain hotel in southern Chu, Emily gave a big yawn, rubbed her sleepy eyes and woke up from her dreams. Her little stomach made a rumbling sound, which was the main reason the little girl woke up from her sleep. She turned her head to look at Su Xinxing, who was sleeping next to her. Because the little girl had used his arm as a pillow, Su Xinxing was currently snoring loudly on the bed. Although he wasn't particularly afraid of the heat because he didn't need to pay extra money, the air conditioner for Su Xinxing was still extremely extravagant for the entire night. My stomach is hungry. Emily pushed Su Xinxing's face, but the latter only mumbled incoherently in his sleep. He waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly and then went back to sleep. As a result, the little girl's face puffed up like a steamed bun. She jumped off the bed and then clapped her hands together in front of the double bed. The bed was like an open book, and the head and tail of the bed suddenly joined together, sandwiching the still sleeping Su Xinxing between them like a ham in a sandwich. Ouch! A muffled scream came from inside. Although it didn't hurt, Su Xinxing naturally couldn't go back to sleep with such a sudden sound. Because the inn they were staying at didn't include breakfast, Su Xinxing, who was annoyed by Jasmine, could only change his clothes, yawn, and go out to buy breakfast in a half-asleep state. On the way, he ran into Xiao Jingyi, who was also planning to go out to eat breakfast. Compared to a few days ago, Xiao Jingyi's complexion and spirit were clearly much better today. In his words, it was as if he had one less person who was constantly yelling in his ear when he was sleeping. He could finally have a good night's sleep after not having had a long time. Southern Chu's Xilongbao and wontons were quite famous. In addition, with Xiao Jingyi as a free meal ticket, Su Xinxing naturally ordered 2 large bowls of each. He ate one on the spot and took the other away. In this regard, Xiao Jingyi could only smile bitterly at Su Xinxing's stingy personality, who would never let go of an opportunity to freeload, but he had nothing else to say. After all, Su Xinxing was not really that casual. He would only freeload the food and drinks of those he liked. In a sense, it was a way for Su Xinxing to show his closeness. Of course, the most important thing was still to save money for a meal. Speaking of which, is it really okay to continue like this? During breakfast, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but ask. His Yuanrong sword could roughly sense the direction of the Son of Heaven's sword. Last night, after making a reservation at the hotel, the Yuanrong sword discovered that the Son of Heaven's sword was moving towards a rural area in southern Chu. Originally, Xiao Jingyi wanted to cancel his reservation at the hotel and follow the direction of the Son of Heaven's sword. According to his thinking, the number of people in the rural area was limited. If he wanted to find the Son of Heaven's sword, it would definitely be much easier to find than in southern Chu, where there were hundreds of thousands of people. However, he was stopped by Su Xinxing. Don't worry. Emily discovered the Son of Heaven's sword yesterday. I also sent a ghost spirit to follow it. There won't be a problem. Su Xinxing swallowed a Xilongbao in one bite. If an ordinary person ate like this, their tongue would definitely be scalded by the gravy in the steamed bun. However, for Su Xinxing, this degree of heat wasn't enough to break through his defenses. On the contrary, he could better enjoy the freshness of the gravy and the sweet and creamy taste of the steamed bun filling, which whetted his appetite. Oh, so that's how it is. Wait a moment, you found it yesterday. Xiao Jingyi, who was about to eat a small wonton, stared blankly for a moment. Then, with an astonished expression, he said, "Then why didn't you say so earlier?" If they had discovered the Son of Heaven's sword yesterday, then they could have completely solved all the problems in a short period of time. Then they could have directly returned to Jiangjin yesterday. Yesterday, I took a look at the Son of Heaven's sword and its current owner. I discovered that the situation seemed to be a little different from what the Yuanrong sword said. Therefore, I plan to let the ghost spirit observe for a while before making a decision. After finishing the small wonton in 2 or 3 bites, Su Xinxing wiped his mouth and continued to answer. What about the truth? Xiao Jingyi suddenly asked. In any case, even if we went back yesterday, we would have definitely failed our exams. We might as well travel for a few days at public expense. I'll bring breakfast to Emily first. Take your time to eat, it's not public expense. Don't run, you bastard. Back to the present. The black mass of monsters gathered together. It looked like a large dark cloud had smashed onto the ground. Black smoke billowed and surged toward the exit and the few people. But before they could get close to Su Shinxing and his group, they were easily dispersed by Su Shinxing with a wave of his hand. C. Could this be the legendary grandpa who suddenly appeared to save the day when the protagonist fell into a desperate situation and gave him a peerless martial arts and a peerless beauty granddaughter? Ding Yong patted his head, his eyes shining. I don't think so. Earthchild no longer had the energy to complain about this guy. The most powerful thing about the haunted house was that it had accumulated ghost energy over a long period of time. Even if the black smoke-like monsters were torn to pieces, they would quickly regenerate. It was just like how shadows would definitely form in places where there was light and light. It was a phenomenal situation. Thus, Su Shinxing, who realized that it was useless to just use his fists, simply asked for the holy sword. Then with one sword he sent all the ghost energy to meet their fellow villagers in the underworld. However, the matter was not completely resolved. As mentioned before, the Emperor's sword contained far more grievous energy than the haunted house. After the haunted house was broken by Su Shinxing through brute force, what was left was naturally the Emperor's sword in the center of the haunted house and the sword spirit girl who had been completely swallowed by the grievous energy. As expected, it still ended up like this. The sword spirit of the Yuanrong sword looked at the sword spirit of the Emperor's sword, who had been completely demonized. He could not help but feel sad for the death of the rabbit. Su Shinxing did not say anything. He just walked toward the sword spirit girl who was draped in a black grievous energy robe. Her eyes were emitting scarlet light, and her face was devoid of any rationality. Wait a minute. Chen Tua seemed to have guessed something. His face was pale as he wanted to stop Su Shinxing. However, Ding Yong held him tightly. Roar. The demonized sword spirit girl roared and pounced toward Su Shinxing. Su Shinxing did not draw his sword. Instead, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at her. With the strength of his fist, there was currently no living creature on Earth that could survive after being hit by it. If this punch landed, the sword spirit girl would probably be reduced to ashes. However, just as the fist was about to touch her, Su Shinxing suddenly retracted his fist. Therefore, although the fist did not directly touch her, the power of the fist wind still hit the sword spirit girl. However, for some reason, the sword spirit girl stopped in her tracks, as if she was not affected by the fist wind at all. Instead, a lot of black fog was blown out of her body by the powerful fist wind. Oh right, sword spirits are immune to physical attacks. Xiao Jingyi hammered his palm. He remembered that he could not touch the sword spirit of the Yuanrong sword and suddenly understood Su Shinxing's actions. If Su Shinxing's fist really touched the sword spirit girl, regardless of whether she was immune to physical attacks, King Kong was not bad or immortal, she would definitely die. However, in this situation the only thing that could cause damage was the fist wind. Although he did not know why the fist wind could blow out resentment, it was the absolute truth that it was effective. Most of the resentment was blown out by Su Shinxing's fist and returned to its original appearance. However, because its power was extremely weak, it retracted back into the sword. Su Shinxing pulled out the sword and threw it to Tu Wazi. Chapter 158. I refuse. Because there weren't enough days to attend, Su Shinxing, who usually failed his subjects, could only bitterly participate in the school's tutoring during the summer vacation. At this time he was busy with the homework left by his advanced mathematics teacher. With an impatient expression he rejected Xiao Jingyi, who had specially come to ask him to assist in the investigation. By the way, Qin Xingyan had taken Chihaya Fukuyama to the Earth Loli's place for special training. It was estimated that they wouldn't be back until nighttime. Why do you have to come find me every time something happens? Isn't that super birth thing of yours useless? It's the super administrative office. Fang Xiaoqing, who was following behind Xiao Jingyi, quietly corrected him. That's about right. Oh, it's far from right. Xiao Jingyi muttered in his heart. However, as the one asking for help, he naturally wouldn't say this out loud. Instead, he continued to persuade, because the guy this time is more troublesome. In short, he's not someone ordinary people can deal with. The cause of the matter had to be explained from the ongoing exhibition. Perhaps some readers have already forgotten, but before Su Xinxing and his party left for southern Chu, Jiang Jin was about to hold a grand exhibition. Xiao Jingyi's Yuanrong sword was obtained from there. After Xiao Jingyi and his party solved the problem of the emperor's sword and returned to Jiang Jin, they were informed by Su Feng that a strange thief had appeared at the exhibition. As for why he used the word strange thief instead of thief, it was because the other party had imitated what they saw on TV. Before the theft, they had actually sent out 3 notices in succession. They wanted to steal 3 different exhibits at different times. However, after Jiang Jin's Public Security Bureau laid down layers of blockades, the other party succeeded without anyone noticing. Realizing that there was definitely something supernatural going on, Su Feng simply applied to set up defenses there. It was said that he and Antares were prepared to sleep on the floor of the exhibition. However, the items were still stolen. At this point, Su Xinxing finally became a little interested. Although he didn't have a good impression of the middle-aged fox Su Feng, as the leader of the super administrative office, the other party still had the ability to be able to steal from him without him noticing. It seemed that the thief was indeed not simple. Didn't the surveillance camera record anything? Su Xinxing asked. Before the other party acted, they seemed to have used some method to hack into the computer inside and destroyed all the surveillance cameras. Xiao Jingyi shrugged his shoulders as he replied. If he could find any important clues from the surveillance camera, he wouldn't have risked being thrown out of the door by Mo Li to ask Su Xinxing's help. You guys really don't even know what happened? Thinking, asked. If there were no clues at all, then it would be a bit troublesome. After all, Su Xinxing was only strong enough to fly on the level of combat power, but in terms of perception and insight he was at most at the average level of his former comrades. The station chief suspects that the man has some kind of special hypnotic power. Even though none of the officers at the scene noticed it, after his investigation he realized that all the officers at the scene, including himself and Elder Shinsu, seemed to have lost several minutes of their memory, and the criminal might have made his move during that period of time. When Xiao Jingyi saw that Su Xinxing seemed to be a little interested in this matter, he immediately took out the information on his side. Simply put, it was to cut off the memories of everyone around him during the time of the crime, so that those people's memories before and after the crime were seamlessly connected to achieve the effect of no one being able to remember his appearance. If it wasn't for the unique ability of certain races, the criminal's control of the curse was probably at the level of a master. Therefore Su Xinxing simply told Xiao Jingyi his conjecture. Speaking of which, old Su, can you withstand the other party's magic? Xiao Jingyi pondered for a few seconds before asking thoughtfully. Generally speaking, in this world, there is no curse or supernatural power that can cause too much damage to me. Su Xinxing patted his chest confidently. Generally speaking? Xiao Jingyi's eyes widened. That means there are exceptions, right? That's surprising. I thought you were already immune to poison. Of course, poison was useless. Even if it was melted copper juice, Su Xinxing could drink it as Fanta, but if he ate high-grade seafood he would have to lie in bed. Well, because my resistance to curse is passive, no matter if it's buffs or curses, they won't have any effect on me. But this is based on the result of others' casting. Su Xinxing said mysteriously. But old Su, I remember that you don't know how to cast spells, right? Although it's not something to be proud of, please allow me to emphasize again that our protagonist is an idiot who doesn't know how to cast spells. Even if he sealed Mo Li and had a huge amount of magic power in his body, he still couldn't cast spells. He couldn't even release his magic power to create simple magic cannons. That's right, I don't know how to cast spells, but Mo Li can. Su Xinxing put down the ballpoint pen in his hand and made a gesture to show off behind him. Thus, Mo Li, who was munching on the potato chips that Chihaya Fukuyama bought for her, was exposed to the 3 of them. The girl seemed to feel something and turned around to look at them. She tilted her head in confusion. Because of this movement, her long blonde ponytail flowed over her shoulder and flowed down her chest like a golden waterfall. Then, as if she suddenly realized something, the girl handed the bag of potato chips to Su Xinxing. No need, I don't like to eat this. Su Xinxing looked at the label on the bag that said New Australian Lobster Flavor, and couldn't help but laugh dryly. But then, as if he remembered something, he said to Mo Li, speaking of which, you've been eating too many snacks recently, right? After you finish this bag, you're not allowed to eat anything before dinner, understand? Understood. Mo Li replied expressionlessly. Nodding with satisfaction, Su Shenxing cleared his throat and continued. Mo Li and I, in a sense, are of the same mind. As long as I'm willing to accept it, Mo Li's magic will work on me. Of course, even so, the effect will be greatly reduced. Really? Can you demonstrate it? Xiao Jingyi asked excitedly. You're so annoying. I just have a strong desire for knowledge. Su Shenxing, who couldn't persuade Xiao Jingyi, could only sigh and let Mo Li turn around again to prepare a magic. It's best to have that kind of intuitive change. If it's an ordinary blessing or something because it can't be seen with the naked eye, there's no need. After thinking about it, Su Shenxing added. Jasmine closed her eyes and pondered for a while. Then she opened her eyes and gave Su Shenxing a thumbs up. She looked as if she had achieved her goal. Under the expectant gaze of Xiao Jingyi and Feng Shaoqing, the girl raised her hands and shouted, Balra energy. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Su Shenxing just muttered a sentence and his whole body disappeared with a bang. And at the place where he was originally sitting, a black cat appeared. Meow, WF. The black cat's face was confused and it couldn't understand what had happened. Speaking of which, Sakura apartment doesn't allow pets. Emoli seemed to think of something and hammered his hand, then grabbed Su Shenxing by the back of his neck and threw him out. Landlord, wait until you turn back into a human before you come back. The girl gave a thumbs up. I'll eat snacks for dinner and get through it. Meow, you're just doing this for snacks, aren't you? Looking at Su Shenxing, who turned into a black cat, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but feel confused. What the hell is going on? Chapter 159. Su Shenxing walked alone on the street. Originally, even if he turned into a cat, Su Shenxing was undoubtedly the strongest cat in the world. It was not difficult for him to sneak into Sakura apartment with his own skills. But when he was about to put his plan into action, he bumped into Song Yu at the door of the apartment. For some reason, when the girl looked at him with shining eyes, he felt a sense of fear. In the end, he lost to his biological instincts and ran away. When he came back to his senses, he was already on the streets of Jiangjin. Most of Mo Li's magic was sealed in Su Shenxing's body. If Su Shenxing knew how to use magic, he could use his current magic, which was far more powerful than Mo Li's, to break this spell in one go. The problem was, as a magic idiot, Su Shenxing could not even do a simple counterspell with magic power. Based on Mo Li's current situation, this transformation spell could at most last for 3 days. If he was lucky, he might be able to change back to his original state in 2 days. In short, first he had to make sure that he had food for dinner. Because of his human dignity as a hero, Su Shenxing would rather rob Xiao Jingyi than go through the trash like a real wild cat. But he did not know if it was because he had been taking the blame for Su Shenxing recently, but this time Xiao Jingyi was unexpectedly smart. When he saw that the situation was not good, he actually took his junior and escaped. It seemed that he could only rob Su Feng. After making such a decision in his heart, Su Shenxing casually found a tree and climbed up. He wanted to recognize the road from a higher vantage point. After all, things looked completely different from usual from this height. Even his sense of direction had a subtle error. Meow, oh, so it's here now. Just as he was still trying to determine his position, he heard the voices of girls below. Sister Wenhua, that kitten seems to be unable to get down from the tree. Wow, it's really a kitten berry flower. So, apricot flower please. You are the older sisters, okay? Why do you want me to go? I don't know how to climb trees. The 3 girls who looked like sisters were quarreling under the tree, which attracted Su Shenxing's attention. At this time they seemed to have discussed something and were trying to reach the branch where Su Shenxing was through the human pyramid. However, the problem was that the 3 girls' physical strength wasn't too strong. After they finished folding the arhat, they were still at least a meter away from the tree branch. Looking at the 3 wobbly people, Su Shenxing sighed helplessly and jumped down from the branch. Sister Wenhua, that kitten jumped down by itself. I see it. But Barry, hold on a little tighter. I think it's shaking a little too much. He's more than powerful. Hurry and catch me, I'm going to fall, your little sister is going to fall. In the end, Su Shenxing could only watch helplessly from the side as the 3 sisters fell into a pile. How should he put it? He felt that these 3 girls were a little clumsy. Ooh. I feel like we're being looked down upon by the kitten. The girl called Berry Flower mumbled with a sad face. It must be an illusion, it won't scare me. Wenhua answered decisively. In short, after regrouping, the three girls looked awkwardly at Su Shinxing, who hadn't left. Sister Wenhua, what should we do now? Can we raise this child? Berry Flower wanted to hug Su Shinxing, but he nimbly avoided her. It's a little difficult. The place we live doesn't allow pets. Wenhua thought for a while and decisively passed the responsibility to her youngest sister. Why don't you ask Apricot Flower? That's why you asked me. Apricot Flower wanted to cry but had no tears. Su Shinxing thought for a while and suddenly felt that following these little girls to eat and drink seemed to be a good idea. Not to mention other things, at least it was more beautiful than Su Feng, wasn't it? Thus he began to learn from our national treasure, the panda. He obviously had the ability to become the overlord of the land, but he chose to act cute for a living. Dividing line, the plan was very successful. After acting cute, Su Shinxing was carried in Berry's arms and brought to the three sisters' home. In Wenhua's words, this wasn't adopting the Xiao Hei cat, it was just taking care of it for a while before it found an owner. The only unfortunate thing was that the three sisters were young, at most about the same age as Emily, so their chest armor was very hard. Su Shinxing, who was carried in their arms, enjoyed the treatment of a washboard. Other than saying, "What the F*** seat, it's so hard," he didn't have any other thoughts. Of course, normal people wouldn't have prepared cat food at home, so the girls just fried a piece of fish cake for Su Shinxing and poured him a lot of milk. Su Shinxing was very satisfied with this meal. In order to repay the kindness of this meal, Su Shinxing decided to try his best to help this family fulfill a wish before returning to Sakura apartment. After eating and drinking, Su Shinxing strolled around the apartment that wasn't too big. Not long after, he confirmed the family's situation through the notes in the house and the girls' diaries. First of all, the three sisters' father had a glorious past. He started a very famous company from scratch. But with the downturn of the world economy, his company eventually went bankrupt. He could only sell his house and car and bring his family to live in a cheaper apartment. However, the three sisters' father obviously didn't give up. At the age of 40, he had been trying to make a comeback. Using a sentence in his notebook, it was, "Since I was able to start from scratch in the past, of course I can do it now." Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. They knew that their father's business hadn't improved. Coincidentally, the three sisters' mother was a police officer, and now she was part of the criminal investigation team. She was a member of the team to prevent the thief from continuing to steal from the museum exhibition. On the other hand, the three sisters' thoughts were much simpler. They just wanted their parents to be happy. In this way, he could more or less understand what he needed to do. If it was intentional for Su Shinxing, it wouldn't be difficult to help the three sisters' father earn some money. In fact, he was quite good at pretending to be mysterious. In short, because it wouldn't be too long, he couldn't help the three sisters' father regain his glory. However, in the case of paying off his debts, it shouldn't be a problem to accumulate enough capital. As for the three sisters' mother, it was even easier. As long as he helped Xiao Jingyi catch the so-called monster thief, everything would be fine. In this way, he should be able to retire successfully. Moreover, he could also fulfill Xiao Jingyi's request. It was like killing two birds with one stone. Chapter 160. The three sisters of the Yin family seemed to be very famous in the neighborhood. Although Su Shinxing did not intentionally eavesdrop, he still heard some rumors from some neighbors. Because their parents were busy with work, they did not seem to have the time to take care of the three sisters. Therefore, under the influence of the eldest sister and Wenhua, the three girls developed some strange hobbies in the end. The eldest sister and Wenhua liked and believed in the existence of Uma, unidentified life form. She even put it into action. She spent all day in Jiangjin looking for some Uma mentioned in the local urban legends in Jiangjin. The second sister and Blue Flower was slightly better than the eldest sister. She just narrowed the target of her passion from all unidentified life forms to aliens. It was said that she once set up a strange magic circle on the rooftop of her apartment to call for aliens. Of course, nothing happened in the end. The youngest sister and Xinghua was the most normal in a sense. Her values were the closest to the average person. Other than being afraid of ghosts and spirits and believing that people would turn into ghosts after they died, there was not much strange about her. However, after Su Shinxing stayed at the Yin family for a night, he had a preliminary understanding of the three little girls. To put it simply, the eldest sister Wenhua was an idiot with super high mobility. The second sister, Blue Flower, was a natural nerd who had a sister complex. The third sister, Xinghua, was a complaining slave who overworked herself to death. It was worth mentioning that these three little guys who looked about the same age as Emily were still primary school students. This was not strange. Based on appearance alone, even if Emily was thrown into primary school, it would not be strange. It was just that Su Xinxing was afraid that she would explode the earth in anger because of the naughty children's harassment, so he arranged for her to be in junior high school. Clang clang. I don't know how many representative meetings have been held in the Yin family. And Wenhua stood shakily on the racing seat. At the same time, Su Xinxing felt that she would fall down at any time, and at the same time he announced condescendingly. The remaining two little girls had completely different expressions. And Blue Flower's face was full of excitement, and she clapped her hands hard. And Xinghua, on the other hand, had a helpless expression, and clapped her hands very perfunctorily. Mom hasn't had a good rest for a few days because of the case of the strange robbers. We have to do our best to catch the criminals. And Wenhua continued. Then she lowered her voice and said softly with a serious face, I'm guessing that the culprit this time is probably the legendary Uma Ponkovic. Meow. Hearing the unexpected words, Su Xinxing couldn't help but look up. Looking at her older sister who was obediently listening to her scolding, Apricot sighed again. Really, why do I have to accompany you to fool around? Because we're free during the summer vacation? Wenhua blinked and immediately answered. Oh, I feel bad for not being able to refute that. Apricot covered her chest and groaned. Speaking of which, there was still tutoring for failing classes today. Not good. She could already foresee the teacher's cold gaze after the incident. Su Xinxing, who was lying on the sofa, was about to cry because of the difficulties she was about to encounter. In short, just like what I said before, if we don't investigate, we don't have the right to make wild guesses. I peeked at Mom's shift schedule. She's on shift today, so it shouldn't be a problem for us to sneak in. Apricot coughed and continued to pretend to be an adult. But how do we find clues? Berry raised her hand and asked, the police must have already searched all the places that can be found, right? We can only talk about this when the time comes, but I have a way to increase the success rate. Apricot looked at Su Xinxing with a smile. It said that cats have an average of 240 million olfactory cells, which is higher than dogs, which have an average of 220 million. Of course, the olfactory cells of dogs differed greatly due to the different types of dogs. For example, a normal police dog had about 300 million olfactory cells. Wenhua and Berry's gaze fell on Su Xinxing, who didn't realize the impending disaster and was still lamenting about her future tutoring. Meow. When Su Xinxing felt a chill down her spine because of the three sisters' gazes, everything was too late. Chapter 161. 2 consecutive failures made the Jiangjin Public Security Bureau extremely passive. If it wasn't for the fact that the stolen item wasn't too valuable, the pot-bellied bureau chief would have already been fired. Even so, there was an extremely solemn and gloomy atmosphere among the police stationed in the museum. If the same thing happened a third time, then they would really lose all their face. Even so, they couldn't even find a single clue, let alone a criminal. If they were to say that they would be able to catch the culprit the third time, perhaps not many people were confident. Some of the police even thought that this was a supernatural incident. Because of this incident, even the museum was temporarily closed to visitors. In this kind of atmosphere, Li Tinghua checked whether the infrared alarm was working properly as if there was no one around. Sister Tinghua, your daughter seems to have come to see you. A member of her team quickly walked over and reported to her respectfully. Which one is it? Wenhua or Berryhua? Xinghua is more obedient, she shouldn't be here to cause trouble. Li Tinghua mumbled. Ah, the three ladies are here. The policeman smiled bitterly as if he was in a difficult position. Although the mischievous little girls were considered frequent visitors at the police station, so almost everyone recognized them. However, the current situation wasn't good, so it wasn't the time to play with the children. And they are leading a black cat, saying that they want to help catch the thief. Nonsense. Li Tinghua scolded and walked to the entrance of the museum with a stern face. The first person to see her was Wenhua. Li Tinghua's stern expression didn't have any deterrent effect. The little girl ran over with a smile. Who asked you to come? Li Tinghua wasn't someone who couldn't distinguish between public and private matters, so she continued to ask with a stern face. At the same time, she also saw the cat that the team member was talking about. It was a pitiful Xiaohei cat, whose neck was tied by a dog leash that Barry found somewhere. It was quietly hanging in the air, the cat's face sad. Speaking of which, in this kind of situation that was similar to hanging, it was already incredible that the cat didn't burp. We are also here to help. Wenhua raised the leash and argued for her sister. Because of her action, the cat that gave up struggling also swayed left and right like a pendulum. How to put it, it felt a little pitiful. Xinghua, I thought you were the most sensible. Because the eldest and second children were both idiots, Li Tinghua directly looked at her younger daughter. The latter looked away guiltily and stammered, I have already advised my sisters. Liar, at that time you were clearly very happy to participate in the discussion. Su Shenxing, who had already given up on life and become a useless cat, complained in his heart. Anyway, go home now. Don't cause any trouble here. Got it? Li Tinghua's sister, Sister Xiaohei, she lets go play with the kids. Lu, the policeman's the three girls' three sisters, the policeman, that they, the policeman looked at the three sisters' disappointed and pitiful expressions and couldn't help but persuade them. And I think that if the young ladies appear, it will definitely boost everyone's morale. Are you all lolicons in the police station? Su Shenxing continued to mutter to himself. Of course, this was only due to the prejudice of lolicons. In fact, the police officers all knew these little girls, so they wouldn't feel estranged or overly vigilant just because they were unfamiliar with them. Children had the ability to make adults happy, so it was indeed best to use them to adjust the atmosphere. Li Tinghua thought about it and felt that it made sense. Plus, when the museum opened, she and her husband were busy with work and didn't have time to play with these little guys, so she felt a little guilty. Thus she sighed. Okay, it's not impossible to let you guys play for a while. Really? Thank you, Mom. That's great, Sister Wenhua. The two silly girls cheered. Even Xinghua let out a sigh of relief. The black cat was swung around like a meteor hammer because of Xinghua's unconscious movements. The cat's face was filled with despair as it moved in a circle at a uniform speed. Wait a minute, you guys should know these words, right? Li Tinghua stopped the girls from cheering and pointed at the sign at the entrance of the museum. On it were the words, "Pets and food are not allowed in the museum." Below it was an image of a dog and a chicken leg. There was also a big red cross on top to indicate that it was forbidden. Mom, listen to me, Wenhua said with a serious face as she pointed at the black cat that finally stopped. Sesame paste is not our pet. Based on this development, it should be something like, it's our friend. Su Shenxing guessed in his heart. Li Tinghua also had an expression of, I almost guessed it, or what kind of stupid name is this cat given? It's our backup food. Meow, wait, so you already had this in mind when you named me? Give me back my trust in you guys. Su Shenxing started to struggle again. Unfortunately, food is also forbidden in the museum. A mother knows her daughter best. Li Tinghua did not waver in the slightest. She only patted the sign and continued. This is a blind spot. Wenhua's little face was shocked. That was a mistake. Barry hugged her sister as if she was sorry that she didn't think of this in advance. That's why I said from the beginning that we couldn't get away with this, right? Apricot looked coldly at her two stupid sisters. But because of this, because the restraint was reduced, the black cat's feet could finally reach the ground. Su Shenxing shrunk his head, broke free from the dog's leash and quickly ran into the museum after regaining his freedom. Not good, let everyone catch it. Li Tinghua immediately yelled at the policeman beside her. There were many valuable things in the museum. If the cat broke a few of them, it would be troublesome. After all, the responsibility was ultimately on her side. If her husband received the compensation letter, he would definitely faint. Okay, I'll let them do it now. The policeman also knew the severity of the situation. He immediately ran into the museum and prepared to mobilize all the police forces to catch the black cat. Look at what you guys have done. Li Tinghua originally wanted to scold them, but when she turned around she realized that her daughter was gone. She looked around and realized that the girls had already shouted something like, "Sesame paste, don't run," and ran into the museum with the black cat. This made the policewoman click her tongue in anger and quickly run into the museum. Chapter 162. Thanks to the Yuan Rong sword incident, Su Xinxing had some understanding of the layout of the exhibition hall, so he was not completely clueless. If he remembered correctly, the two stolen items were a fist-sized pottery bowl that was claimed to be an antique from the Yuan dynasty, but its age was unknown, and a small bronze cauldron from the Warring States period. The former was said to have been stolen from the tomb robbers in the Xiaxia area 20 years ago. They had tried various methods but failed to determine its age. In the end, the local research institute handed it over to the exhibition to prevent it from occupying the research resources. After all, there were quite a lot of ancient tombs in the Xiaxia area, and one could find an antique just by taking a few steps in the wild. The local archaeological research institute had long been filled with all kinds of things to be studied. The latter used to be an antique passed down from ancient times in a Taoist temple in the suburbs of Xianyang City. Later, during the Four Olds period, the Taoist temple was smashed and the things inside were burned, smashed, and robbed. This antique was also lost among the people. In the end, because the original owner felt sorry for it, he donated it to the country when he could not find the temple. Because there was no professional identification certificate, the valuations of the two items were not high. They were the kind of things that had a certain historical value but were actually worthless. If the robber had not made such a big move like the criminal notice, it would not have caused such a big uproar even if it was lost. However, one could not just look at the surface. According to Qin Xingyan, who had seen the photos of the two stolen items, the former was the small pottery bowl. Although she could not recognize it, the bronze cauldron that was smaller than a wash basin was a real Taoist relic. Many of the things that looked like patterns on it were, in fact, encrypted words in the Taoist scriptures. According to the description, it should be a treasure that was originally used to store elixirs in the Taoist temple. However, since it was smashed by some mortals, it meant that the orthodoxy of the Taoist temple was likely to have been lost long ago. Then there was the last item, which was announced to be taken away today. It was a mahogany carving about 20 centimeters high, of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi holding the three treasures jade rui scepter. This thing was also not an antique. It was said that it was just a casual work of a slightly famous sculptor in the Republic of China who was entrusted by a certain Taoist temple. The evaluation of this thing by experts was that it had a certain historical value and artistic value. Although there was no room for appreciation, it could be collected and admired. It was very tactfully pointed out that this thing could not be sold for money. Su Xinxing sat cross-legged under the display case, staring at the statue. After turning into a cat, although her strength was limited to a certain extent because she was not used to this body, even the blessing of the 10,000 races, which allowed her to understand language, had disappeared. Her senses had become much sharper. Even so, he still couldn't sense what was so special about this thing. Could it be that the thief really didn't have any other motives and just wanted to make a big news? In this world there shouldn't be such a joker, right? Su Xinxing wagged his tail uncertainly and racked his brains. Then, like a real cat, he got up lightly and nimbly went around the booth, avoiding the police who were trying to catch him from behind. Next, he would go to see the two exhibition halls that had been stolen. Among the crowd, people were shouting, "Where is it going? Hurry up and stop it. No, it's going to slip away. The cat is drifting. This is the legendary whirlwind charging tornado. Is so fast, are all Jiangjin's cats monsters?" In the midst of the commotion, Su Xinxing happily made a decision and easily got rid of the police. He came to the exhibition hall where the pottery pot had been placed before. In this exhibition hall, he still couldn't sense the aura of magic or supernatural power, but considering that the theft had happened 2 days ago, the weak aura might have disappeared long ago. Meow. Well, wait a minute. Just as Su Xinxing was about to leave, he vaguely felt that something was wrong with his cat's intuition. So he carefully went around the exhibition hall that was too big for his current body, looking for the source of this strange feeling. More than half an hour later, while avoiding the police who came to look for him, Su Xinxing also found something. In a corner of the exhibition hall, there was a small hole that looked like a mouse hole. If he hadn't become small now, maybe it would have been really difficult to find this hole. Although the hole wasn't big, it was still big enough to fit the stolen pottery bowl. That was to say, it was very likely that the stolen pottery bowl was taken from here. Su Xinxing thought for a moment and felt that it was useless to just think about it. So, like a cat sharpening its claws, he pulled the hole a little bigger. Then he lowered his body and crawled in. He dug the soil to expand the hole as he slowly moved forward. Fortunately, after passing through the hole, the tunnel in the hole was still quite spacious. Otherwise, Su Shenxing would have been stuck in it. If he wanted to come out, he would have to make a lot of noise. After going in for a while, the front suddenly opened up. Su Shenxing then noticed that he seemed to have gone under the museum. Because it was located in the suburbs, the exhibition hall didn't spend money to dig an underground garage. Instead, it circled a piece of land in front of it as a parking lot, which also meant that there was nothing under the museum. Meow, holy *t. However, what appeared in front of Su Shenxing was a space about the size of an indoor basketball court, maybe slightly shorter. In the center there was a small village. The houses in this village were about the size of a microwave oven, and the residents were humanoid creatures similar in size to mice. Because they were hardly exposed to the sun, their skin showed a pale color, and their faces were somewhat similar to a race called goblin that Su Shenxing had encountered in another world before. However, compared to the goblin, these creatures were obviously much smaller, and they had a tumor-like organ on their forehead. It was worth mentioning that the only light source in this underground village was the crystal-clear luminous mushrooms cultivated by some unknown method, and the fields that these humanoid creatures cultivated only had various kinds of mushrooms or wood ears. From the function of their clothes, which were similar to clothes, but in fact were grown from fungi, it could be seen that these little creatures' technology seemed to have been invested in the cultivation of fungi. Because the scene in front of him was so incredible, even Su Shenxing was stunned for a while before he realized what was going on. A group of unknown supernatural creatures had actually settled in Jiangjin under his nose without anyone noticing. Chapter 163. At first, when they saw Su Shenxing turn into a black cat, the little creatures were frightened. They felt like a white-headed worm that suddenly jumped into the village during the farming era. Especially when this guy was invulnerable and didn't have the weakness of becoming weak after coming in contact with water, he was obviously a bigger threat. The group of unknown creatures made strange noises while taking out spears that looked like they were modified from chopsticks and keys. They nervously confronted Su Shenxing. Su Shenxing waited there for a long time, but found that the other side didn't seem to have any supernatural attacks at all. So he spent about 30 seconds suppressing these little creatures. He spent so much time chasing them back, and then tried to communicate with them. Meow 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 meow, at #%yen#. Well, they couldn't communicate as expected. So Su Shenxing made a throat-slitting gesture to the humanoid creatures, meaning that if they couldn't communicate they could only die. Obviously, they understood this universal gesture and immediately panicked. Suddenly, one of the little creatures walked out confidently and then, beep 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 beep. It patted the ground with both hands and it seemed to be using Morse code. It seemed that these little creatures weren't really isolated from the world and still had knowledge about the outside world. Unfortunately, meow, sorry, I don't understand Morse code. No. The creature hugged its head and made a painful sound. Then Su Shenxing and the creature were stunned. Meow, seems like we can communicate. I understand. Oh my God, for the sake of the goddess of nature, why don't you sit down with us and have a drink? The little creature's tone was inexplicably translating, I don't think we need to be so, hostile to each other, right? Su Shenxing immediately understood the situation. It seemed that the effect of Mo Li's magic was starting to fade, and the effect of the blessing of all races that allowed Su Shenxing to communicate with other races was back. Meow, why not? Therefore, Su Shenxing didn't refuse and followed the strange creature, who might or might not be the village chief, to their village. Probably because they knew that they couldn't beat Su Shenxing no matter what, so these little creatures didn't continue to waste their energy using chopsticks to warn him. But when Su Shenxing arrived at their door, he found himself in an awkward situation. Even though he had transformed into a cat, he was still too big for the door of these small creatures. He couldn't enter their door at all. Fortunately, the little creatures knew what was good for them. They immediately took out the things inside and it looked like they were going to have an outdoor party. After that, the leading little creature began to introduce itself to Su Shenxing. Chapter 164. Hall 7 was where the bronze cauldron was originally placed. Compared to the previous hall where the bowl was placed, This hall's decorations had a more ancient Taoist feel to them. On the display stand, there were ancient Taoist items such as a horsetail whisk, 3 clear bells, pill cauldrons and so on. Therefore it was not strange for the bronze cauldron to be displayed here. Sister Wenhua, where do you think that thing was originally placed on display? Barry looked at the variety of exhibits and couldn't help but feel dazzled. That empty stage. Wenhua tilted her head and guessed with uncertainty. Correct. Su Xinxing nodded imperceptibly. Because the museum was closed after the theft, without any other exhibits, the empty stand was the display case where the bronze cauldron was placed. As expected, I can't see anything just by looking at it. Barry stared at the display case for a while before finally giving up and rubbing her eyes. At this time we need sesame paste. Wenhua hugged Su Xinxing and pushed him onto the display case. Just like with the bowl, Su Xinxing couldn't feel anything strange here. Even if he put down his human pride and tried to sniff around like the cat, he still couldn't find anything. Also, in the Gerona dwarf village, he confirmed that the culprit didn't steal the bronze cauldron. Then could it be that the culprit was someone else? But since the crime notice specifically arranged the time, then the culprit should be the same person. Even sesame paste is unable to find any clues? That sure is a headache. Wenhua crossed her arms before her chest and frowned like an adult. She looked incredibly cute. So, it is still the work of an unconfirmed creature. I think it's more likely that it's an alien. Barry didn't back down and said, even Sister Wenhua can't do that. Looking at the two arguing again, Xinghua and Su Xinxing couldn't help but sigh. At this time footsteps came from outside the door. Not good, the police are here. Xinghua immediately stopped her two sisters who were still bickering. Then she pulled them into a red wooden cupboard whose purpose was unknown. Are the kids and the cat here? The police's voice came from outside the cupboard. Judging from the change in the source of the voice, they should be patrolling this room. No, there's not even a shadow of a ghost here. Another policeman's voice rang out, and then their conversation gradually faded away as if they had left. Wenhua let out a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to leave, she was pulled back by Xinghua. Not only that, Xinghua even placed her index finger on Wenhua's lips, telling her not to speak. After a while, the voices of the two policemen came from the door again. Alright, it seems like no one is here. Then let's hurry to the next exhibition hall. If we can't find them, Big Sister Tinghua will go crazy again. This time, their voices could be considered to have truly faded into the distance. To actually play such a trick on a few elementary school girls, those two fellows were too low for the police. In addition, Apricot Blossom was able to see through the plan of the two adults. Considering her age, this was already very impressive. Why do I feel like the policemen are patrolling more and more carefully? Barry muttered as she stretched her arms. Because Mom looks scary when she's angry. Apricot Blossom answered casually and continued to search for clues. To this, Su Xinxing could only not comment and continued to search for clues. But since he had already looked at the cupboard for a while, he knew that it was meaningless to rely on magic to detect the remnants of the magic. The only thing he could do now was to quickly find the traces left behind by the real culprit to determine the truth. At this time, Su Xinxing suddenly noticed the cupboard that they were hiding in. If his memory was correct, the first time he visited this place he didn't remember seeing that weird cupboard. In other words, it was moved here during this period of time. And there was another strange point. Why didn't anyone show any reaction when they saw this strange mahogany cupboard? The girls had hidden inside naturally and didn't have any questions about why there was a box here. The policemen were also blind. They didn't even notice such a big and obvious thing. This was really illogical. In other words, the mystery was on the cupboard. Thus, Su Xinxing gave up on the cupboard and began to explore the weird mahogany cupboard. He didn't look inside the cupboard and it was dark just now, but it was different now. After adapting to the darkness, Su Xinxing realized that his feline vision allowed him to clearly see the inside of the cupboard. But to be honest, there wasn't much to see, it was just an ordinary cupboard. If there was anything different, it would be that on the side of the cupboard, there was a button that looked like an elevator. It started from the B floor, which was the basement floor, and went to the 10th floor, which was the highest floor, which was 21 floors in total. Meow, why is there such a button in the cupboard? This is too suspicious. It was almost certain that this thing was the main part of the puzzle. But even so, Su Xinxing wasn't good at this kind of thing. If he wanted to talk to the three little girls, mainly Apricot Blossom, just the fact that the cat could talk and the voice was that of a man, was enough to scare them. Meow, wait a minute. Elevator, could it be the so-called elevator game? Suddenly, Su Xinxing remembered a horror movie he had seen before. He couldn't remember the specific name, but Su Xinxing still remembered some of the classic scenes, such as some ghost games. Chapter 165. According to the movie that Su Xinxing had watched, as long as the elevator went to the 4th floor, the 2nd floor, the 6th floor, the 2nd floor, the 10th floor, and the 5th floor, some strange mechanism would be triggered, and the elevator would start to cross worlds. After reaching the 5th floor, according to the sequence, a woman would enter the elevator. However, at this time he couldn't look at her or talk to her, otherwise something irreversible would happen. Finally, after pressing the button for the 1st floor, the elevator would reverse to the 10th floor. At this time, when he stepped out of the elevator, he would have arrived at a different world. Although at first glance it looked no different from the original world, in fact, other than the person who did this, there were no other humans in this world. Of course, Su Xinxing also saw on the internet that there were netizens who did the same thing according to the plot of the ghost story in the movie. The result was not good. They were chased out by the property management, who found the elevator abnormal. All in all, after Su Xinxing pressed the buttons according to the sequence in his memory, nothing happened. Even when he reached the 5th floor where the so-called mysterious woman would enter, nothing happened. This made Su Xinxing feel quite regretful. He really wanted to see what the so-called mysterious woman in the different dimension was. In fact, because this so-called elevator, which looked no different from a wooden cabinet from the outside, could not feel the acceleration of ascension or the sense of weightlessness when descending. It could only be seen from the flashing LED lights, which always gave people the feeling of a cheap toy. All in all, this made Su Xinxing wonder if he had made a mistake. In fact, this thing was just a decoration? Or this thing had nothing to do with the ghost story and he was just thinking too much. However, recently, other than the prank of foreigners, it seemed that this ghost story was the only thing related to box elevators. Just as Su Xinxing pressed the last button with the word 1 without much hope, the button did not light up. Instead, it was the button with the word pick up that lit up. Then, as if the elevator had arrived at the station, the door of the cabinet opened automatically. This made Su Xinxing quite surprised. One had to know that this thing was just an ordinary manual wooden door. Outside the door was no longer the interior of the exhibition hall. Instead, it was a pure white space dotted with azure blue dots. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that those dots were actually small windows, and the azure blue outside was a considerable distance away from the windows. Earth? Excuse me, did I just take a freaking elevator directly into the universe? Su Xinxing rubbed the space between his eyebrows with his soft meatball, feeling a little confused. Of course, they were not in contact with the Celestial Empire, but with the self-proclaimed hope of mankind. Similar to the East Asian monsters, for some reason, aliens always appeared in the Western Hemisphere, especially in the Western Hemisphere. If the data held by the Centaurus Princess was correct, there were about 1,500 aliens on Earth. Most of them were in the Manhattan area and were under the jurisdiction of the MIB. Su Xinxing did not know if there was a similar organization in the Celestial Empire. Before he met Su Feng, he did not even know about the existence of the Super Administrative Office. Su Xinxing sat on the ground and stared at the two little gray men hugging each other. He thought for a while and asked, "Meow, why does the door behind me lead to a museum on Earth?" Oh my god, I can understand the language of this terrifying alien. This is too scary. Zenith, go back to Zenith. Su Xinxing, how should he put it? Su Xinxing had traveled extensively, experienced interstellar wars, and even fought head-on with the Centauri rebel fleet. He had seen countless aliens. But this was the first time he saw such a cowardly alien. In his words, "Meow, you are the worst aliens I have ever seen." Chapter 166. Survivors of the space accident from 10 years ago? In a small office in the corner of the Jiangjin Public Security Bureau's Criminal Police Brigade, several people with special identities were welcomed. Su Feng threw the document in his hand on the table and looked curiously at the people who brought it in. Although the incident was due to an accident in space, the higher-ups didn't make the whole thing public, but as far as I know there shouldn't be any survivors, right? 3 people went up and the recovered bodies were also 3 and they all died of pressure loss. That's what we thought, but something doesn't seem right. Because the astronauts signed an agreement if they sacrificed their lives for the country we can conduct research on their bodies. So, after confirming the cause of the accident, we didn't cremate them directly. Instead we planned to conduct some research. But the problem is, after a few years one of the bodies has never changed. It didn't dry or rot, and even the skin still maintained its elasticity. It's like it's still alive. One of them sighed. Actually, the higher-ups wanted to hand over the full authority of this matter to the super administrative office. But no matter what, it's related to the situation in space. So they asked us to come and assist in the investigation. So you came all the way to Jiangjin to tell me this story that has nothing to do with our group? Su Feng listened patiently for a long time, but he realized that this matter didn't seem to have anything to do with him. Because 10 years ago, whether it was the launch site or the recovery site, the spacecraft was quite far from Jiangjin, and the wreckage was not preserved nearby, so he had no idea why these guys came to him. If that's the case, of course we wouldn't come to you. The guy who spoke was still the same guy. It seemed that his authority wasn't low, which made the other people look like a human background. We said before that we're looking for survivors. Wait, do you suspect that the person whose body didn't change is actually not dead, and the so-called body is just some kind of camouflage or a substitute? Su Feng's mind flashed and he asked in disbelief. Although it's really unbelievable, when the astronaut's friend passed by Jiangjin he accidentally saw someone who looked exactly like the astronaut. This gave us a direction for the investigation, so we can't give up. The man said calmly, Team Leader Su, please understand and support us. Okay, I'll believe you for now. Because there was no conflict of interest with the other party's department, Su Feng frowned, but he didn't reject it too much. Then tell me, how can I support your operation? The other party smiled and said, actually this is not difficult. Division line. In short, after the 2 little gray men calmed down, Su Xinxing asked for some information, Su Feng's information. But regardless of whether the other party would go back on their word, the fact that he had to stay in the white flying saucer for a few days without any entertainment was enough to kill him. Besides, Mo Li's physical condition was also worrying. Although it was not a big deal to go out for a short while, he would have to go back to replenish the girl's magic sooner or later. So, the best way was to find a way to catch the mastermind behind this as soon as possible. Meow, forget it, I'll use tonight as an opportunity to take care of the other party. Although the other party might find some strange things to help steal the treasure, as long as it intended to take away the cultural relics, Su Xinxing would have a chance to catch it. And Su Xinxing vaguely felt that he might have already figured out who the culprit was. Please wait a minute, if you really catch that guy we won't be able to leave here. The little gray man said with a gray face. Meow, does your spacecraft have equipment to store energy? Of course, if there is enough energy we can directly jump to the vicinity of our home. But even if all the power plants on Earth were to supply us with electricity, it would take a long time to fully charge. The little gray man said with a gray face. Meow, take me to see it. So, the little gray man brought Su Xinxing to the so-called energy storage part. For some reason, Su Xinxing felt that the thing looked like a large pushpin. He poked the thing with his claws, and the little gray man who was monitoring the hole took a deep breath. It's fully charged in an instant. Unbelievable. Meow, why is it in English? Chapter 167. After Su Xinxing returned to Earth through the passage, the small red cabinet gradually disappeared. It seemed that the aliens had left. After wandering around the exhibition hall for a while, Su Xinxing could not find the 3 little girls. It seemed that when he ran into space he was caught by the police and sent out of the museum. In order to better monitor the situation of the crime, Su Xinxing simply went under a table in the exhibition hall where the last exhibit was located and waited for the announcement to come. After a while the mutation began. At first Su Xinxing, like Xiao Jingyi and the others, thought that the prisoner had used a spell like hypnosis to make the police lose the memory of the time when the crime was committed. But the truth was obviously not that simple. When Su Xinxing came to his senses, the time of the crime had already passed, and the statue of the Heavenly Lord of the beginning had disappeared. So that was it. If it was a mortal. No, even if it was a brilliant magician here, there was no way for him to figure out what the prisoner had done. but Su Shenxing could. It was not because his magic immune physique had an effect, but simply because he had experienced something similar before. Once Su Shenxing had a close friend in a different world. In a battle, in order to save Su Shenxing, who was still a rookie at the time, his close friend had burned his own plate of life. This caused his body to become like a sieve, unable to retain his life force. He could only watch as it flowed away. In order to save his close friend, Su Shenxing chose to ask a powerful and temperamental witch for help. So, after the witch received the corresponding reward, she cut off the next 20 years of Su Shenxing's time and used it to repair his plate of life, giving him 20 years of life. Because of the extremely deep impression, Su Shenxing could be sure that the feeling of his time being cut off at that time was almost exactly the same as the feeling just now. However, the cutting of time seemed to be limited to the museum, so Su Shenxing did not feel it before. Someone who could tamper with time could be regarded as a strong enemy even if it was limited by the area. After all, this kind of enemy belonged to the concept system, and if placed in the sword and magic world, it would be at the legendary level. Ever since he returned to Earth, he had not encountered an opponent of this level. Not only was Su Shenxing not afraid, but he was also eager to try. Whether it was time cut or time halt, other than the fact that he had yet to meet someone who could reverse time, it wasn't as if he had never fought an enemy who could play with time. Although Su Shenxing had turned into a cat, in a sense his power had been limited to a certain extent. He should be able to last a little longer. Crawling out from under the table, he walked through the police officers who were panicking because of the disappearance of the exhibits and came to a person. It was Li Tinghua, who had been sitting silently at the side since the beginning. He seemed to be regretting it. Although others would probably think that she regretted not being able to protect it well, Su Shenxing knew that this was not the case. They looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Li Tinghua clapped her hands and the noisy exhibition hall quieted down. It was not that the police officers were silent, but they were now like stone statues, fixed in place and motionless. Not only the police officers, but even the flies flying in the air were frozen. If the picture was not in color, it would give people the feeling that time had stopped. In fact, it was indeed a kind of time halt, but the other party only paused the time in the museum and the time outside was still flowing normally. Although I don't know what you are, I advise you to know your place, and stay away from my daughters. Li Tinghua, the initiator of all this, warned Su Shenxing fiercely. Meow 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 meow. Su Shenxing retorted, not to be outdone. Speak human language. Who the hell are you? Su Shenxing, who only now realized that he could stop meowing, suddenly felt overjoyed, but he still tried to be serious and asked the other party. I don't need to explain to you. Then the second question. Su Shenxing did not care at all about the other party's rejection, but continued to ask, why did you encourage the Gerona dwarves and aliens to steal things? With your ability it would be easier to do it yourself, right? Li Tinghua did not answer but only sent a flying kick, but it was easily dodged by Su Shenxing. Last question. He continued to ask as he ran in circles, what do you want? But just like before, Li Tinghua still pursed her lips and did not answer a word, but only stared fiercely at Su Shenxing. Her non-violent and uncooperative attitude. Fine, actually she wanted to be violent, but Su Shenxing just dodged it. In short, her attitude made Su Shenxing come to a decision. Communication ability 0, violent temper, unknown origin, degree of danger. Slightly high. If that was the case, there was no need to be merciful. The next moment, a white light flashed and Li Tinghua, who did not have time to react, had her right hand cut off at the shoulder, revealing the white bones. It fell to the ground with a thud. Strangely, her wound did not bleed at all. She really was not human. Su Shenxing waved his claws. Although he had hit the other party, his claws did not feel like he had hit a solid body. He locked his gaze on the other party's neck. And the other party did not look like she had a broken hand, neither did she shout, "Ah, my king's power," nor did she learn any unique skills like the overwhelming sadness palm. Chapter 168. Su Shenxing realized that he couldn't understand the meaning behind her words at all. What did she mean by, "let my child bask in the sun"? Could it be that the three sisters were vampires? But when he was with them, Su Shenxing didn't sense any supernatural powers from the girls. Then again, what Su Shinxing hated the most was this kind of person who didn't say anything and liked to be mysterious. If he hadn't received the kindness of the three sisters and felt embarrassed to kill their mother without understanding anything, Su Shinxing would have already killed her 7 or 8 times just based on this person's strange appearance in front of him and the time it took to talk to her. But even so, Su Shinxing's patience was reaching its limit. So he didn't continue to talk to her in a bureaucratic tone. Instead, he narrowed his bright yellow cat eyes and wagged his tail in annoyance. He said coldly, "I'll give you 2 options now. One is to explain the situation to me in 300 words. 2 is to die. Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you have this ability. The number of time ability users who have died by my hands is enough to form an idol group in the academy." I can't feel the feeling of death anymore." Li Tinghua's shoulder blade trembled, and the arm that was originally cut off at the shoulder reappeared. She snorted coldly and mockingly, but before she could finish, Su Shinxing's claws cut her waist in 2. And unlike the usual physical attacks before, this time his claws were covered with a layer of cloud scales, enough to cause considerable damage to some supernatural creatures who could ignore physical attacks. Not only that, but because of the cloud scales attached to the wound, unless Su Shinxing retracted them, it wouldn't be able to heal or regenerate. This was also why Su Shinxing couldn't summon the holy sword in his cat form, but he was still not afraid of time ability users. Obviously his actions had worked. Li Tinghua let out a heart-wrenching scream and fell to the ground, looking at herself in disbelief as she was cut in 2. "Although I don't know what you are, it seems like it won't be difficult to kill you." As he spoke, Su Shinxing's furry cat claws were already on Li Tinghua's head. As long as he exerted a little force, he would be able to crush Li Tinghua's head through the cloud scales. "Wait, I surrender." Before Su Shinxing could make a move, he finally realized that the person he was dealing with might be a vicious and merciless guy. The other party no longer looked as confident as before. Instead, he begged for mercy in a very sorry state. Su Shinxing originally wanted to kill her directly, but after a moment of consideration he decided to listen to her explanation first. Anyway, at the very least he could treat it as a story. Dividing line. Li Tinghua's original name wasn't Li Tinghua, but after reincarnating she had almost forgotten her name in her previous life. Right now she could only vaguely remember that she was in the aerospace industry in her previous life. After she died in a space accident, her soul didn't enter the underworld. Instead it floated to the moon. Then, on the far side of the moon she found strange instruments and several corpses of humanoid creatures with 3 eyes. After tinkering in that area for a relatively long time, Li Tinghua's soul was exposed to the strange rays emitted by those instruments. In the end she ended up in her current strange state, and without anyone teaching her she learned the knowledge of the original owners of those corpses who claimed to be Julie citizens. After that, Li Tinghua flew back to Earth and reincarnated into a woman named Li Tinghua. Of course, this was not the climax of the story. The climax was that Li Tinghua, who borrowed another person's body, finally gave birth to 3 children for an authentic human. This was no longer a problem of different species, but even the matter was different. Reproductive isolation and so on, just watch. Li Tinghua loved her daughters very much, but unfortunately because of physical problems, the girls had some congenital defects. As the result of the love between a human and a half-ghost, it was already very good that they didn't die halfway. Although the 3 sisters survived, their defects didn't disappear. In fact, as a place where a human and a ghost were born, the physical condition of the 3 sisters was worrying from the beginning. They couldn't stay in the sun for too long, they couldn't be blown by too much wind, some of the human food was not practical, and even if they paid attention to everything, they were destined to die early. The reason for this was very simple, because part of their souls was similar to that of a ghost, which was exposed to the outside of their bodies. Because of this, Li Tinghua took the risk of being discovered and specially set up a trap to steal what she needed. The pottery bowl seemed to be the first food utensil of human in the Neolithic age, which had the meaning of new life. Using it to store medicine could make the medicine achieve the best effect. The Taoist bronze cauldron was actually a variant of the alchemy furnace, but later on the special alchemy technique was lost, so it was used as a utensil to store medicine. Finally, there was nothing special about the statue of Heavenly Lord Yuanshi itself. The real important thing was the 3 gems jade rui in the statue's hand. That thing was carved out of a very special ancient jade fragment. With it as the main material, through the unique alchemy technique of the people of Juli, they could refine a very special medicine. Its specific name was something that couldn't be verified even in the memory of the people of Juli. If mortals took it, they could be reborn. If evil ghosts used it, their souls could condense into a new body, which was really amazing. Although there was definitely a difference between a body mainly made of jade and a real human body, it was much better than exposing the soul. When the topic began to move the novel closer to the direction of a cultivation novel, Su Xinxing wisely stopped Li Tinghua from continuing to talk about it. In short, this farce was purely made up by this guy to help his daughters reconstruct their bodies. Although it was a little big as a supernatural creature, it didn't belong to the unforgivable type. What's more, Su Xinxing also owed a debt of gratitude to his 3 daughters. Since everything was for their sake, he naturally didn't need to stop him. Anyway, he already got the 3 things, so Li Tinghua should be able to live a peaceful life and honestly live a normal life. Thinking of this, Su Xinxing retracted his paw and sighed. Later you can resign by yourself. Take the blame for this matter that you made and this matter will be over. He glanced at Li Tinghua. In the future, behave yourself, okay? If you bump into me again, you'll be in trouble. You're letting me go just like that. Originally, Li Tinghua had already prepared for the worst, but she didn't expect Su Xinxing to let it go so easily. Nonsense, do you want me to ask you to stay for dinner? Su Xinxing turned around and planned to leave the museum. However, at this time, a stern voice came from the door. You can't let the prisoner go without permission. Chapter 169. The first time Luo Zhizhen saw her was at the National Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. At that time, the girl was climbing on the persimmon tree behind the courtyard. She carefully tiptoed, trying to pick the green persimmons that didn't look completely ripe. As a member of the Abnormal Events Management Office, it was the first time Luo Zhizhen saw such an interesting girl in such a serious place. Although his unit was subordinate to the Super Administrative Office, because the matters he dealt with were biased towards aerospace, he dealt with the National Space Administration more often than the Super Administrative Office. It was precisely because he was used to the group of old-fashioned people in the training center that when he suddenly saw such a lively girl, she immediately left a deep impression on Luo Zhizhen. To put it more exaggeratedly, it was as if the whole world suddenly lit up and became a beautiful picture scroll. People below, get out of the way. However, beautiful things didn't last long. Luo Zhizhen, who was in a daze, didn't react in time. He was hit by a bat that fell from the sky and became a human cushion. He was sent to the infirmary because of a nosebleed. This was the first encounter between the two that wasn't romantic at all. After that, Luo Zhizhen found out that the girl was also a department member of the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. Because of her excellent grades in school, she interned here in advance. Although the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center was not as strict as the military, because some projects involved state secrets, the personal freedom of the people who worked here was more or less affected. Because of this reason, although the girl was young and had no contact with the astronauts, she could only spend her youth with a group of old men and women. In this case, it was normal for her to have some sparks with Luo Zhizhen, who often came to the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center. He was good-looking and had a good personality. With the impact of their first meeting, the relationship between the two quickly became closer. In the beginning, when Luo Zhizhen occasionally went to the training center, he would bring some cakes, cookies, donuts, and other inconvenient desserts as gifts for the girl. And the girl who received the gift was embarrassed to eat it for free. So when Luo Zhizhen came here, she would cook something for Luo Zhizhen for lunch or dinner. Over time, what started out as a normal meal gradually turned into a scene where the two of them flaunted their love for each other. Whether it was Luo Zhizhen's colleagues or other people in the training center, they could only tactfully retreat to prevent themselves from being blinded by the flash. On the grass field in the training center's courtyard, the two of them sat side by side, eating sandwiches made by the girl herself. The girl pretended to sigh in dissatisfaction and complained, "Sigh, why did I board your pirate ship for no reason?" Due to the confidentiality agreement, Luo Zhizhen didn't tell the girl his real job. However, the girl vaguely felt that his job wasn't ordinary. Or rather, the fact that he could freely enter and leave a place like the Astronaut Scientific Research and Training Center was already extraordinary. Probably because I'm more outstanding. When Luo Zhizhen was young, he still had the sense of superiority that was unique to government personnel. He grinned at the girl, not noticing that there were pieces of seaweed stuck to his teeth. I'm not bragging, but when I was in school I was the most handsome guy in the school. The love letters I received every day were thicker than the textbooks. The girl naturally looked at him coldly. Yes, so our Mr. Luo should find other rich and beautiful women with better conditions to reach the pinnacle of life. Don't worry about a research dog like me who doesn't know how to dress like a country bumpkin. After that, the girl who finished her lunch brushed off the crumbs on her white lab coat. She was about to leave when Luo Zhizhen grabbed her hand. He smiled and said some words of love. If you can stand at the door and wait for me, then behind you is the pinnacle of my life. Shameless bastard. Wait, you seem to have misunderstood something. Well, even though the occasional small quarrel was inevitable, the relationship between the two was gradually warming up. After about 2 years of dating, they finally reached the point where they were about to talk about marriage. However, someone from the China National Space Administration suddenly found the girl. They hoped that the girl, as a research specialist, would be an astronaut in the latest manned spaceflight. They wanted her to complete an experiment in space that ordinary astronauts couldn't complete. Also, because this experiment was sensitive, this space mission wouldn't be announced to the public. Because this kind of mission had a certain degree of risk, participation wasn't mandatory. When Luo Zhizhen found out about this, the girl had already thought about it carefully and agreed to participate in the mission. Because of this, the two had a big fight. They even said things like breaking up. However, when the rocket was about to be launched, Luo Zhizhen still went to the site. Humph, if you don't come, you'll be dead when I come back. After seeing him, the girl wiped her tears and said stubbornly. Luo Zhizhen just hugged the girl. Well, because he was wearing a spacesuit, it felt special. He didn't defend himself, nor did he apologize or refute. He just gently whispered in the girl's ear, "The persimmons in the training center are ripe again. When you come back, let's go pick them together. I'll climb the tree this time." The girl paused for a second, then her expression softened. She wiped the tears on her face and nodded with a smile. Obviously, people in that era didn't know what a flag was. So when the spacecraft entered Earth's orbit, because of a mechanical failure, the cabin suddenly lost pressure. Even though they had emergency treatment training because of the serious engineering error, the 3 astronauts, including the girl, could only wear their spacesuits and quietly wait for the oxygen to run out. Luo Zhizhen, who was full of anticipation, saw the girl's cold body after the spacecraft was recovered. There was a recording pen in the spacesuit, and the people from the space agency had copied the recording that the girl had specially given to Luo Zhizhen. The girl's familiar voice revealed her fear in the face of death, and it made his heart ache even more. It was probably from then on that Luo Zhizhen never liked another woman. Well, of course he didn't like men. After discovering that there was something wrong with the girl's body, he took advantage of his position and transferred it to the Extraterrestrial Abnormal Events Management Office's vault. Then he climbed up in the system step by step, in order to raise the girl's body to the highest level of priority. About 10 years passed like this. Then, in the museum in Jiangjin City, he saw the figure of his dreams again. Although there were some changes in her appearance, he believed that he would never mistake her for someone else. She was the girl from back then, his one and only lover. Hence, when he saw that the black cat seemed to be planning to let the woman leave, he lost all of his usual calmness and shouted out subconsciously, "You can't let a criminal go without permission." Chapter 170. Speaking of which, Luo Zhizhen pointed at the black cat on the ground and turned back to ask Su Feng, "This guy spoke just now, right? This is already under your jurisdiction, right? Aren't you going to arrest it?" Su Feng, who had already learned about Su Xinxing's tragic experience from Xiao Jingyi's report, obviously wouldn't go looking for trouble. "Of course not," he just shrugged. "In our line of work, the most important thing is to act according to our ability. I can't beat it." Luo Zhizhen was a little surprised by this. Although Su Feng was currently sent to Jiangjin as a local commissioner, Luo Zhizhen knew that this guy wasn't a big deal. On the contrary, he was one of the most powerful people in the super administrative office. He was once the director of a special high-risk shelter in the Celestial Empire. If it weren't for some political considerations, he wouldn't have been sent to this place. The black cat that even he admitted that he wasn't a match for. Could it be a big monster from ancient times? But these weren't factors that Luo Zhizhen needed to consider. Suspect over there, I'm now arresting you for theft and intentional destruction of cultural relics. He walked toward Li Tinghua with a strong sense of righteousness. Li Tinghua frowned and clapped her hands. Suddenly, the strange silence that shrouded the museum disappeared. The statue-like police officers moved again and immediately noticed Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen, who suddenly appeared in the museum and surrounded them. You can't be thinking that these ordinary people can do anything to us, right? Luo Zhizhen wasn't a superhuman, but when he came into contact with aliens, the Celestial Empire's Abnormal Events Management Department also obtained some alien technology. There were even a lot of alien technology products, many of which were allocated to the members of the Abnormal Events Management Department, who acted more like special agents than the police. As the director, Luo Zhizhen was fully equipped. Putting aside the alien species, if it were ordinary people, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him without hundreds of fully armed and highly trained soldiers. Li Tinghua didn't answer. She just clapped her hands again and the time in the entire space stopped again. This time not only the police, even Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen became like statues. Only Su Xinxing was still unaffected. After experiencing this situation twice in a row, Su Xinxing could see the nature of this woman's ability. Strictly speaking, Li Tinghua didn't really have the ability to stop time. Her ability was closer to cutting and pasting time. Under certain conditions she could cut a part of the time in a specific area. This would cause a certain degree of space-time discontinuity, but because it wouldn't happen in a large area, it wouldn't affect the stability of the world's structure. The time tesifs. Esit its. Tuzes. After stus, s's its, the s was s this too. S. And during the time that was cut off, the other people's state was almost as if time had stopped. Similarly, because this ability was limited to an area, when Su Feng and Luo Zhizhen entered the museum from the outside, they happened to be in the time that was cut. Therefore they were not affected by the ability. Therefore Li Tinghua cut the remaining time again and let the flow of time return to normal. Then she pasted it again, causing the two newcomers to fall into a similar state of time freeze. So that's how it is. The time that was cut off is kept in your soul, but the priority of the time is very high and the burden on your soul is considerable. In addition, you are the type of person who reincarnates in another body, so the compatibility between the soul and the body is not high. If this continues, you will soon die again. Su Xinxing narrowed his eyes and saw through the woman's current state. As expected, my power is still unable to affect you. Li Tinghua could not help but sigh when she saw that the black cat was still alive and kicking. Although she tried her best to hide it, Su Xinxing could see that she was at the end of her tether. The elixir that you plan to refine, is it useful for you? Su Xinxing thought of the elixir that the woman mentioned before. It is useful. But to be honest, I don't have much time left and the refining time of that kind of elixir is very long. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in such a hurry. I plan to ask the alchemists of this era to refine the elixir for my daughters. If I use the lost alchemy technique of the Juli tribe as a bargaining chip, they should be very happy. Li Tinghua revealed her plan with a bitter smile and then asked seriously, but my husband can't take good care of my daughters because of work. When the time comes, can you help me take care of them? Li Tinghua, who did not know that Su Xinxing's real identity was a lolicon uncle, sincerely sold her daughters. Of course, as the protagonist, Su Xinxing was not the kind of person who would take advantage of others' difficulties. Moreover, he who lost his mother when he was young, knew very well how difficult it was for children to live in a single-parent family, and how much impact it would have on children. Therefore Su Xinxing tried hard to think of a solution. If Mo Li's seal was unlocked to the third stage, it shouldn't be a problem to pause time and slowly refine the elixir. Because it was a universal time pause, there wouldn't be any space-time discontinuities, so the safety factor was very high. The only problem was that when the seal was unlocked to the third stage, Mo Li would be in danger of going berserk. Although there was Su Xinxing and the safety of the Milky Way should not be a problem, if he accidentally used too much force, it would be a matter of seconds for him to blow up the Earth. Even Su Xinxing was not 100% sure that he could stop it. Forget it, it was not worth it to gamble on Earth for a half-human half-ghost. In short, Su Xinxing tapped Li Tinghua with his cat paw. Give me your phone, and the guy over there, stop pretending. Su Feng, who was still maintaining the posture of a flying noodle god, immediately returned to his normal standing posture. He scratched his head a little awkwardly. Was I discovered? From the beginning. Speaking of which, I can't believe you can do that kind of action. Leaving aside Li Tinghua, who was surprised that there was someone other than Su Xinxing who was immune to her ability, Su Xinxing began to tap on the phone after he got it. However, because of the cat paw, it was very difficult to operate the touchscreen phone, and to the onlookers it looked like a kitten playing with the phone. After realizing this, Su Xinxing stopped messing around and waved his paw at Su Feng. Help me make a call. Who is it? Su Feng thought for a while, then took out his phone. At this time, why don't you ask magical Xingyan? Chapter 171. Of course there is a way, but I'm not too sure about the specific method. I may have to go back to the Bailu temple to look for related ancient books. Qin Xingyan's voice came from the phone with the loudspeaker turned on. After Su Xinxing explained the cause and effect to her, the girl was silent for a few seconds as if she was thinking about something. Then she gave a definite answer. Su Xinxing could only sigh in his heart, as expected of Xingyan a dream. Although Sakura apartment was currently the weakest in terms of knowledge, there was no doubt that this chief disciple of the Bailu temple was the best in the entire Sakura apartment. But obviously, Li Tinghua did not think so. Little girl over there, although I don't know anything about the Bailu temple, the alchemy method of the people of Juli is different from that of ordinary Taoism. If you think that the method that is effective for alchemy is also effective for the people of Juli, then I'm afraid you're wrong. Speaking of which, what exactly is the so-called people of Juli? Su Feng asked curiously. Although Li Tinghua had mentioned similar words several times, there was no specific explanation. He only knew that the bodies of the two three-eyed people on the back of the moon seemed to be related to the people of Juli. Actually, I'm not too sure about the details. Li Tinghua smiled bitterly and shook her head. In my memory, the description of the people of Juli is only a general impression of losers living in the gray world. But combined with other memories, I guess they are very likely to be similar to humans, but their technology tree has completely deviated to the other side. Compared to natural physical science, they are more inclined to the mysterious alien creatures of the cultivation world. You heard it too. Even so, is there still a way? Su Xinxing continued to ask the phone. To be honest, even Su Xinxing felt that it was a little difficult. After all, Li Tinghua's description of the technology of the people of Juli was vague, and he did not know what the so-called alchemy method of the other party was. Under the circumstances where the known conditions were very limited, it was indeed very difficult to come up with a solution. But I've never said that my method is to speed up the alchemy process, right? However, Qin Xingyan on the phone sounded a little surprised. Not to speed up the alchemy process? What method is that? Li Tinghua's eyes widened in disbelief. Soon after, she immediately realized that she seemed to have fallen into some kind of misunderstanding because she was too anxious for success these days. Why did she have to rely on medicinal pills to solve the predicament that she and her daughter were in? After listening to your description of your current symptoms, I feel that it's very similar to a special ethnic group on the other side of the river of forgetfulness. I'm not sure if you've heard of them before, but I remember that their name seems to be... Qin Xingyan paused as if he was trying hard to recall something. Oh right, they're called half-human, half-spirit. Half-human and half-spirit? Is there such a monster? Su Feng, who was listening by the side, could not help but frown. Since the establishment of the super-administrative office, they had encountered hundreds of thousands of supernatural incidents. Almost all supernatural creatures were recorded, but as far as Su Feng knew, the agents of the super-administrative office had never encountered a half-human, half-spirit existence. No, you've definitely heard of the half-human, half-spirit. Impossible, I'm quite confident in my memory in this regard. Su Feng shook his head and said proudly. According to the records in that ancient book, the world's first half-human, half-spirit was called Mengpe. What? Not only Su Feng but even Su Xinxing was shocked. Even he, an ordinary person who had never been involved in the cultivation world, had heard of the legend of Mengpo's soup. It would be strange if there was someone in the Celestial Empire who did not know about Mengpe. It is said that Mengpo's real body is the legendary Meng Jiangnu. Meng Po's soup was originally brewed by her to make herself forget the pain of losing her husband. Later, Yanjun took a fancy to her ability to brew Meng Po's soup, so he took out a part of her soul and turned it into a half-spirit, so that she could walk in the underworld with a living body and have a longer lifespan. By the way, it is also recorded in that book that most humans do not need to drink Meng Po's soup after death. As long as they pass through the river of forgetfulness, they will forget their past and reincarnate again. Only those souls with particularly heavy karma need to drink Meng Po's soup to wash away their karma. How should I put it? It feels a bit fake. Su Xinxing lay on the ground and rolled around like a real cat, which was a sign of his distress. Reincarnation and whatnot have already happened. However, if there is really such a thing as a half-human half-spirit, then Miss Qin's proposal is indeed worth a try. Su Feng also thought for a moment, then spread out his hands and said, "At least refining pills with a lower success rate is worth a try." Even the person involved, Li Tinghua, fell silent. No one knew what she was thinking with her head down. Of course, there are still some problems with this proposal. Otherwise, I would not have gone back to the Bailu Temple to look for that book. What problems? Just when Su Xinxing thought that everything was fine, Qin Xingyan suddenly poured cold water on his face, so he could only helplessly ask. The soul can be considered the most solid object in the world. It is invisible and immaterial, difficult to touch, let alone cut it accurately. As far as I know, the cases that can cause damage to the soul in recent times are all cases where the soul of the other party is directly destroyed, not cut it. The latter is much more difficult than the former. After a pause, the girl continued, "Senior Su, your power is indeed very strong, but I believe you know that if you use your power, which requires the word physical, there is no doubt that you will destroy the soul of the other person. If you want to cut the soul, you have to find an artifact that can cut the soul without damaging the core." Suddenly, the difficulty was raised to another level. "Don't worry, I will refer to the method recorded in the book and optimize it. Then I will do my best to help you." "Oh, as expected of the trustworthy Xingyan A Dream, then I will have to trouble you." Su Xinxing immediately jumped up and was not stingy with his words of praise. So Qin Xingyan muttered to himself, "So can the saying Xingyan A Dream be changed?" and hung up the phone. The exhibition hall was suddenly filled with a cheerful atmosphere. Originally, after Qin Xingyan found what he wanted and helped Li Tinghua solve her current problem, this matter was almost over. As for Luo Zhizhen and Li Tinghua's long story, Su Xinxing had no interest in getting involved. However, at this moment a small figure suddenly ran in from outside. "Mom, bad news." And Wenhua's little face was full of panic and worry as she ran towards Li Tinghua. "Sister." Xinghua suddenly fainted. Chapter 172. Hearing that something had happened to her daughter, Li Tinghua immediately took the lead and ran out. Su Xinxing and Su Feng looked at each other and then followed her. As for Luo Zhizhen and the others who were still like statues. Anyway, according to Li Tinghua, as long as she waited for the timesheet cut to run out, the time flow in the museum would be restored. There should be no problem. Soon the group of people saw Xinghua lying on the bench by the roadside and Barry Hua anxiously running around in circles. "What happened? What happened to Xinghua?" Li Tinghua asked anxiously. "We don't know. Just when we were about to go back, my sister suddenly fainted." Barry Hua was at a loss as to what to do. Su Feng put his right hand on the girl's forehead and closed his eyes to check on the girl. Then he let go of his hand and comforted Li Tinghua. "It's okay. Although I don't know why she fainted, your daughter's body is very healthy now. There's nothing wrong with her." Su Xinxing, who still didn't show any signs of returning to his human form, jumped from the ground to the bench. He looked at the little girl with some doubts in his heart. Just as Su Feng said, there was nothing obviously wrong with the girl's body. There was neither a curse aura nor visible external injuries. There was also no death aura unique to people who were seriously ill. But for some reason, Su Xinxing felt that there seemed to be a strange change in the girl's body, and that change gave him a vague sense of familiarity. Li Tinghua didn't have enough confidence in Su Feng's judgment. In the end, she decided to send the girl to the hospital for a good check. But at this time, Xinghua woke up faintly by herself. "Xinghua, how are you?" Li Tinghua immediately went to her in surprise and asked anxiously. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm just a little dizzy." The girl who seemed to be a little dizzy said slowly in a low voice. It's good that you're okay, it's good that you're okay. Li Tinghua hugged Xinghua. Although she looked like she was crying, everyone could feel that she was actually relieved. After confirming that Xinghua was fine, this incident was about to come to an end. Since Su Xinxing had decided to let bygones be bygones, and Li Tinghua had also decided to pay for the stolen antiques in installments to compensate the city museum, Su Feng had no intention of holding on to it. He was flexible enough. However, just as everyone was about to disperse like this, and Su Xinxing was about to head over to Su Feng's place to make him pay for yesterday's debt, Xinghua curiously asked Li Tinghua, "Mom, why isn't sesame paste coming over?" "Well, it's because it found its new master." Li Tinghua was stunned for a moment. Only then did she remember the terrifying Xiaohei cat. In order to prevent her daughter from being harmed by the cat's poisonous fangs, she tried to coax her in a pleasant manner. As a result, Apricot Flower burst into tears. The eldest sister Wenhua and the second sister Meihua were also affected by their younger sister's cries. Okay, I'll go look for it. Mom will go look for it for you. Because she was afraid that Xinghua would be too agitated and faint again, Li Tinghua could only agree to her request. Then she planned to catch a suitable black cat to complete her task. Unexpectedly, after hearing what she said, Xinghua immediately jumped down from the bench. Then, as if nothing had happened, she ran behind Su Xinxing and picked up Su Xinxing, who had an annoyed expression on his face. Wait a minute, that cat? Li Tinghua was shocked by her younger daughter's reckless behavior. She was afraid that Su Xinxing would suddenly jump out in a rage and shout, "There's a gay guy pulling my zipper," and knock down everyone present. However, what she didn't expect was that although Su Xinxing's expression was very dissatisfied, there were no signs of him exploding. Could it be that this guy's tolerance towards children is higher? Li Tinghua guessed in her heart. After sending the 3 children and the cat home, Li Tinghua was asked by Su Feng to make a statement. Even if Su Feng didn't intend to arrest Li Tinghua, the record was still needed. As for Apricot, because she had just fainted, Li Tinghua forcefully stuffed her under the blanket before she left. She could only watch the other 2 girls play around in the living room. Lying in the silent bedroom, the girls' eyes stared straight at the door as if waiting for something. After a while, the bedroom door opened by itself. Su Xinxing squeezed in through the crack in the door, then jumped onto the bed and looked at the girl. "What are you?" After a while, Su Xinxing asked curiously, "Although you're trying hard to pretend that nothing happened, I can feel that you seem to have changed somewhere. Well, although I have a lot to say before that, Teacher Su, I think it's better for you to go to Crimson Heaven Mountain as soon as possible." Because there was only her and Su Xinxing in the room, cat. The girl didn't have the naivety of a child like before. Instead, she spoke seriously like a little adult. "Why?" Naturally, Su Xinxing was a little confused by her inexplicable suggestion. He could only stare at the girl with the unique sharp eyes of a cat and ask. Crimson Heavens Mountain was where the White Deer Monastery was located. Although Su Yangyi's reputation in the White Deer Monastery should be friendly, the other monsters who also resided in Crimson Heavens Mountain were different. Apart from Grandmaster Mapleleaf, who had long since seen through everything, all the other monsters viewed Su Xinxing as an enemy. In order to maintain the delicate and stable relationship between humans and monsters in the Bailu Temple, it was better for Su Xinxing not to appear. Although you may not believe it, if you don't go now, that Auntie Qin Xingyan might die. Xinghua didn't feel scared by Su Xinxing's sharp eyes. Instead, she answered seriously and seriously. "Are you kidding?" Su Xinxing really didn't believe the girl's words. No matter what, Crimson Heaven Mountain was the headquarters of the Bailu Temple, and Qin Xingyan was the eldest disciple of the Bailu Temple. How could something happen to her there? Moreover, although Qin Xingyan was considered weak in the Sakura apartment in the outside world of cultivation, she was also a rare genius. Her skills could also be considered amazing. How could she be so easily harmed? "I knew it wouldn't be that easy to make you believe me." In that case, the girl sighed helplessly. However, because she looked like a child, this kind of adult action was not only very strange but also very cute. But soon after, her expression became solemn and respectful. Soon after, a white cake-like thing appeared beside her. Not only that, but at the same time, there was also a shining golden sword that was too big for Xinghua. Su Shenxing recognized that sword. No, it should be said that it was one of the 12 holy swords that Su Shenxing had once collected. Shining holy sword, Herakti, then let me introduce myself again. Although my appearance hasn't changed, my soul has indeed changed. I am now in Xinghua 10 years from now, the only student of the future teacher Su Shenxing. Chapter 173. Although it was hard to believe, Su Shenxing had to admit that what Xinghua said was probably true because of the existence of the holy sword of Herakti. After all, the 12 holy swords he collected in the world of Auravia were unique existences, and now their combination, the holy sword of the end, Rolander, was also with him, although he could not summon it in cat form. Unless it was brought over from another time and space, it was theoretically impossible for a second holy sword of the end to appear. Can you tell me more about it? How did you come back to this era and what is your purpose? Even so, Su Shenxing could not accept the fact that the other party came from the future so readily. Other things aside, at least he had to ask the necessary questions clearly. The person who sent me back is you, my future teacher. The girl did not beat around the bush but answered his question openly. According to her, in the original timeline, Qin Xingyan would have been killed when he returned to the Bailu Temple to look for books related to half-human, half-spirit. Su Shenxing in that timeline regretted and suffered because of this. He felt that his commission had caused the death of Qin Xingyan, so he spent nearly 10 years learning the ability to cut open the timeline and sent his disciple in Xinghua back to this era. By the way, it only took you about half a year to cut open the timeline, but because the universe since the Big Bang, the existing timeline is too long, it took you, my future teacher, more than 9 years to locate a rough time point in it. Wait a minute, if I could cut open the timeline I would usually come here myself, right? Su Shenxing interrupted and asked. Although it was not something to be proud of, Su Shenxing generally would not ask others to help him with things that he could do. This was also a somewhat awkward character that he had developed after his parents divorced and he grew up alone. Because even if you cut open the timeline, ordinary people can't travel through time. And you, as a magic idiot, are no exception. The girl seemed to have expected that Su Shenxing would ask this question, and she replied with a smile. Because my mother has a certain degree of ability to manipulate time, I also inherited the corresponding affinity with the concept of time. With the protection of your holy sword as the reference point and singularity point in the two times, I can travel through the timeline and return to this era. Ordinary people can't travel through time, Su Shenxing muttered a little strangely. He once talked to Wu Yejin and knew that she had run back to the mythological era of Fusong with the help of the debate genius, and turned the world upside down with him a few years ago. He also had memories of that event. Although it was not even in the top 5 of his adventures, and he spent the whole event as relaxed and happy as if he was on vacation, but because the local conditions and customs were relatively special, his impression was still quite clear. Even after several years he still recognized Wu Yejin when he saw her. Yes, even if ordinary people really go back to the past for some reason, everything they do will become part of history. There will be no change in the past and it will not affect history. But I want to change the past and create a new future. For this, no matter what will happen, I have already prepared myself for it. The girl nodded and said with certainty. Another thing worth mentioning is that my future teacher wanted me to warn my current teacher that time and space are connected, and that both of them are very fragile in this world. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't try to cut open the timeline. This will cause too much damage to the world itself. In that timeline, my teacher has only cut open the timeline 5 times, but even so, time and space have already become chaotic and even dinosaurs have come out. If this continues, perhaps time will become a mess and the entire world will be destroyed. In that case, even if my teacher is an idiot in magic, you should be able to understand what I'm saying, right? I'm a magic idiot, I'm sorry. Su Shenxing's mouth twitched a few times and his cat whiskers trembled with his movements. He was a little depressed as he lay on the bed and asked weakly, then what happened to Qin Xingyan? Why was she killed? I don't know. So straightforward. You don't know the most important part, hey? Didn't you come back for this? Because the future teacher doesn't know either, the girl's shoulders drooped and she answered rather confidently, at that time, you learned from the Bailu Temple that Auntie Xingyan died in the hands of demons, so you were burning with anger at that time, and you vented your anger on the entire demon clan of Crimson Clouds Mountain. After that, not a single demon in the entire mountain range survived. Even the top of the mountain was lowered by about a meter because of your anger. Not to mention the monsters, even the animals that were hibernating were scared awake and fled Mount Donxia in a hurry. It was even reported by the media as the influence of the El Niño phenomenon. In short, without the person involved, you naturally have no way to know the cause and effect. The girl said it in a methodical manner, and it did not seem like she was making it up. And even if what she said was not true for Qin Xingyan's safety, Su Xinxing could only go to Crimson Clouds Mountain personally just in case. But before that, there was one more thing that he had to trouble Xinghua with. Use the shining holy sword to bring me back to Sakura apartment. I'll go find Mo Li to change back into my original form. I feel a little weird looking like this. Teacher, I think your current form is actually just right. The girl liked Su Xinxing's cat form very much. If you go to Crimson Clouds Mountain in this form, even if you meet the demons you won't be discovered, right? Oh, indeed. He believed that the demons on Crimson Clouds Mountain would never guess that such a small black cat was the person who defeated all of them back then. Although he wasn't afraid of those chi, he would try his best to avoid trouble if he could. Thinking about it this way, perhaps his current form was indeed more convenient. After all, Crimson Clouds Mountain was in China. Even if he turned into a cat, as long as he ran seriously, he should be able to make it in 10 minutes. Or rather, if his goal was in China, no matter where he was, 10 minutes should be enough. The only thing he had to worry about was whether running too fast would cause strange things like typhoons. As long as he moved quickly, he should be able to make it back before dinner. Chapter 174. The Jiujiang Mountain Road was a national highway that ran through the entire Jiujiang, winding through the mountains. Because there were few people along the way and the road was long, there were all kinds of curves and straight lines. Therefore, even though there were many warning signs that said accident-prone area, there were still many drivers who would speed here. Occasionally, there would even be illegal underground races held here. Although there weren't any races held recently at this time, a silver-gray convertible Porsche was speeding along the road. The roar of the turbine engine made people's adrenaline rush, and the oncoming wind didn't blow away the happy expression of the two people in the car. This is my dad's new car. Normal people can't even see it in the Celestial Empire. Look, it's so fast. The man driving the steel beast was about 20 years old. He was showing off to the gorgeously dressed woman in the passenger seat with a proud face. As expected of Mr. Wang, you're different from the common people. I'm so happy, the woman immediately flattered him with a face full of admiration. I'm not bragging. Let me tell you, in the market right now, there aren't many cars that can surpass my Porsche in speed. In 2 days I'll find 2 brothers to hold a race and you'll understand. When the time comes you can bet on me winning. I don't know how much, but it's not a problem to make a few million. Being flattered like this, the waiter with the surname Wang became even more proud. At this time he saw a black shadow slowly approaching him from behind in the rearview mirror. He instinctively thought it was another car and stepped on the gas. The roar of the turbine engine became even louder, and the steel beast named Porsche's speed increased by another level. This caught the woman off guard and she screamed, but the waiter laughed because he got rid of the other party. However, he didn't get to be proud for long before he suddenly realized that not only did the black shadow not disappear, but it seemed to be getting closer to him. And it didn't seem to be a sports car because the shadow was too small. If he looked closely, it felt like a little girl riding on the back of a black cat that was even smaller than her. No, it must be because I've been having too many affairs recently. I'm a little tired, so I'm having such an illusion. Therefore he shook his head and tried his best to maintain his speed. Instead of looking at the rearview mirror, he risked turning his head back to take a look. The little girl riding the black cat was getting closer to him. He was completely dumbfounded by this unexpected situation. What's wrong, dear? The woman, who was good at reading people's expressions, immediately noticed that something was wrong and asked with concern. Look behind us. Is there something chasing after us? Even though he was covered in cold sweat, the waiter pretended to be calm and ordered. The woman turned her head in confusion, but she didn't turn her head back even after waiting for a while. After a while she said in disbelief, "There's a cat is following our car." This caused little fool to tremble all over. It seemed that he wasn't the only one who could see that thing. But the woman didn't finish her. And that cat's left ear is shaking non-stop. It wants to overtake. This made the waiter tremble even more. In the blink of an eye, at a bend not far ahead, the black cat leaned against the drainage ditch and drifted away, leaving them behind. The impact of this scene was so great that the waiter accidentally drove his Porsche into the gutter on the side of the road. Fortunately, only the car was scrapped and the two of them were fine. As for how they were going to leave the gutter and return to human society, it had nothing to do with the speeding Su Shenxing. I suddenly found a problem, Su Shenxing said to Xinghua on his back. What problem? Xinghua, who was using her arms to tightly wrap around Su Shenxing's neck and trying not to be thrown off, asked. I remember Qin Xingyan once said that it would take a day and a night for her to go back and forth from Jiangjin to the Bailu Temple. In other words, including the rest time, it would take at least 10 hours each way, right? Is that so? Xinghua obviously didn't know Qin Xingyan's flying speed, but she didn't doubt Su Shenxing's words. She was a little confused and distressed. So we're early? Even if Su Shenxing took care of the girl on his back and didn't use the long-lost cat high-speed train to reach Crimson Cloud Mountain in 5 minutes, their running speed was still quite fast. But even so, it had only been less than 5 hours since the last call with Qin Xingyan. Even if they reached the destination, there was nothing they could do. If they followed the road to Jiangjin to find Qin Xingyan, there was a high possibility that they would pass by each other for various reasons. After all, Su Shenxing was not good at perception, and as Su Shenxing's future disciple, and Xinghua's attainments in perception could be imagined. Forget it, there's nothing to do at Crimson Cloud Mountain. It's better than missing it. Moreover, if we go there early, we can investigate without disturbing others. In the end, Su Shenxing could only shake his head and continue to rush. Since teacher has said so, then I can only comply. Xinghua didn't object to Su Shenxing's decision, but rather agreed very readily. Not long after, Su Shenxing finished running the mountain path that was very long for ordinary people and came to the foot of Crimson Cloud Mountain. The resort that had been built here before was almost finished. And their decoration was very considerate, minimizing the damage to the vegetation and the land as much as possible. It was more like a farmhouse, which complemented the style of nature. The big maple tree, which was the real body of Master Hong Yi, was not dug up. In order to restrain the monsters, Master Hong Yi simply risked abandoning his real body here and went to the peak to protect and guard the monsters. Fortunately, it hadn't been long since they were beaten up by Su Shenxing. The monsters remembered the fear of being beaten up and the kindness of being saved by the disciples of Bailu Temple, so there wasn't any big news for the time being. That's right, for the time being. Until 2 days ago, a few waiters who somehow got their hands on air guns sneaked up the mountain from the resort villa at the foot of the mountain, wanting to experience the fun of hunting. As a result, they killed the only son of a weasel demon who had yet to transform into a human form. Thus, in a fit of rage, it killed all of the waiters. By the time the Bailu Temple found out about this, it was already too late. A riot was imminent, and the legendary big news was inevitable. Chapter 175. After placing Apricot Blossom in the Bailu Temple, and using Xiao Hei's cat body and ability to speak human language, Su Shenxing easily found out the whole story. To be honest, he didn't want to care about this *T. But logically speaking, this should be the most likely cause for the monsters to kill Qin Xingyan by accident. The next thing to do was to deal with the chaos that might occur in the secular world. After all, the parents of the waiters, who were officials and businessmen, didn't believe in any monsters. Once they took revenge, 90% of them would fall on the Bailu Temple, which had some connections with the secular world. So even if the weasel monster was killed, it wouldn't calm their anger. Moreover, from the looks of it, the weasel, whose family line was already cut off, was the victim. So Su Shenxing went back to the Bailu Temple and told the people in the Bailu Temple and Apricot Blossom about the cause of the whole incident. He decided to go down the mountain himself and warn those who were ready to make trouble. He was the best at pretending to be mysterious. It was only after he came to the nearby prefecture-level city and asked around a little that Su Shenxing realized that he seemed to have made a mistake. Indeed, the parents of the waiters didn't intend to settle the matter peacefully. Instead, they intended to stir up trouble. However, the problem was that although they were considered to be extremely influential in the business and political world, they were still nothing more than local tyrants in the eyes of the country. Not to mention the White Deer Temple, they probably hadn't even heard of an official organization like the Super Administrative Office. Even if they tried their best, it wouldn't be of any use. So, the target of their revenge was naturally not the Bailu Temple but the Forestry Bureau, which was inexplicably targeted. At that time, the Forestry Bureau must have broken down mentally. What the F***ck did this have to do with us? He casually pretended to be mysterious, and this group of people who already had ulterior motives were scared out of their wits. After that, Su Xinxing began to reflect on whether he had made a mistake. At this moment, a pigeon monster that had just gained sentience descended from the sky and extended its paw that had a small note tied to it towards Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing had seen this pigeon monster in Crimson Heaven Mountain before. It seemed that Xinghua had used this method to contact him because he could not use a mobile phone after turning into a cat. Although the pigeon had turned into a monster, its body size was not much different from before. Therefore, the paper tied to its leg was definitely not that big. In fact, there were only 2 or 3 sentences on the note. In short, while Su Xinxing was running amok in the town, Qin Xingyan finally arrived at the Bailu Temple. From this point of view, during the time he went to Fusang, the girl did not put down her own cultivation. Her speed of travel was obviously much faster than before. After greeting the elders of the Bailu Temple, the man went straight into the library. For someone like Xinghua, who had used Su Xinxing's name to sneak in, there was naturally no way for her to follow him into the library. In addition, after Qin Xingyan entered the library, a strange scene occurred in Crimson Heaven Mountain. For some reason, the Sea of Clouds, which was originally one of the 8 sceneries of Crimson Heaven, suddenly surged and a greenish-yellow light was faintly discernible in the Sea of Clouds. Although the Taoist priests of the Bailu Temple did not know what had happened, most of them had an ominous premonition of fear and trepidation. Su Xinxing scratched the side of his neck with his hind legs, and then his cat face became gloomy. Why was this matter getting more and more complicated? It was almost dark. It seemed that there was no way to solve it before dinner. With this thought in mind, he could only accept his fate and run back to Crimson Heaven Mountain. However, after entering the territory of Crimson Heaven Mountain, even Su Xinxing felt that something was wrong. The sky, which was originally clear at noon, was now covered by thick clouds. Green and yellow light constantly flashed through the clouds, accompanied by thunderous rumbles. Ordinary people would probably think that this was just ordinary thunder, and at most they would shout something like, "It's raining, put away the clothes." However, Su Xinxing felt that there was a considerable amount of energy flowing through the clouds. Because his perception was not outstanding, Su Xinxing could not distinguish what kind of energy this energy was on Earth. By now, even he had been influenced by what he saw and heard. He already knew that the energy on Earth was classified into a very complicated category. There was true chi, magic power, spiritual power, true essence, holy light, psionic power, and so on. However, because of this, the fact that Su Xinxing could perceive it meant that the power was indeed very strong. At least after returning from the other world, Su Xinxing had not seen such a powerful existence. Even the old monster that he killed in Jiangjin, who was said to have returned from the Yellow Springs, paled in comparison to this power. When Su Xinxing ran to the gate of the Bailu Temple, Xinghua was already waiting for him there, holding a shining holy sword that was longer than her height. "What's the situation now?" Su Xinxing jumped over a few steps to the girl's side and asked. "The Bailu Temple is in a mess now." At first, the elders of the Bailu Temple thought that a demon in the back of the mountain was about to undergo a tribulation, but when they sent people to ask, they found that there was no such situation. Even the Master Hong Yi knew nothing about it. Therefore, later on, other elders thought that they had taken in a demon and violated the ancestors' rules, which led to the heavenly tribulation. The most important thing now is to get rid of all those demons. Even if they can't kill them, they should at least drive them out. However, many of the disciples of the Bailu Temple who have friendly relations with the demons disagreed. In short, the supporters and opponents are arguing so much that they are about to roll up their sleeves and beat each other up. Nonsense, there really is a heavenly punishment. When it took in the demons, nothing happened. Now it's falling down. Heavenly punishment's efficiency is no different from that of a civil servant. Su Xinxing pursed his lips, his cat face full of disdain. Then he asked, "Then how is Qin Xingyan now?" "The restrictions on the Bailu Temple's library are too strong. Unless I use the shining holy sword to break through, I still can't enter. If I don't break through, the people of the Bailu Temple might misunderstand. Therefore, I think it's better to wait for you to come before making a decision." And Xinghua scratched her face embarrassedly, feeling that there was no use for her to stay in the Bailu Temple. "Don't blame yourself, you did a good job." Su Xinxing patted the little girl's forehead with his cat paw like an old man, completely unaware of how funny this scene was. "Anyway, there's no use in continuing to stay here. Sit on my back, we'll go straight to the library." Do I still have to sit on that?" Xinghua's little face paled, and then she said righteously, "No, teacher, if I sit on your back, I'll slow you down. You go first, I'll catch up with you soon." Su Xinxing thought about it and agreed. Then he confirmed the next steps with the little girl who had escaped a disaster, and rushed up the mountain to the Bailu Temple, leaving behind the little girl whose face was full of joy and an expression of "I'm so smart." You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.